IB Nation, welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast, coming to you live on a Wednesday, which means, of course, it is the Notre Dame Midweek Rundown, is what we call it here.
Rundown, yes.
Where we kind of splice together a bunch of different topics in the middle of a week. We really kind of want to hit on a lot of different things today. We're going to talk about the ESPN FPI rankings. We're going to talk about a little bit of the wide receiver recruiting, because if you follow closely Notre Dame recruiting, you know, the last week and a half, we've gotten a lot of really good context to what this final wide receiver group in the 2023 recruiting or 2024 recruiting class, could ultimately look like. So we're going to hit on that. Also going to hit a little bit on a college football centric part of the podcast as well. We're going to talk Deion Sanders, going to talk transfer portal. Of course, we're going to hit a mailbag at the end. Ryan Roberts, Brian Driscoll here. Brian, I know that we want to get to a lot of these topics today, man. I'm super pumped for it. But, of course, we have something that we want to kick things off with about, just kind of talk about the Tyler Buchner decision that we spoke about a lot yesterday on the podcast, because obviously it had broke like 15 minutes before we started the podcast yesterday that Tyler Buchner was entering the transfer portal to have his options and see what his options were on the table. Latest on that, I guess, to kick off this conversation and start this conversation about Tyler, man.
So here's the interesting thing on this one, Ryan. It's been wild, right? It's been wild. So we talked yesterday about this decision and how, I didn't necessarily love it. And I think he should have stayed. I still think it was the best decision. We talked about some schools he's interested in. And then late last night, started getting some feedback. We actually had somebody on the message board post something very interesting. And so I had been hearing some feedback about, would the players be receptive to it? Like, why would Marcus Freeman allow him to publicly kind of say, I have the option to go back? And as you do some digging on this, and I put an intel piece on the board last night and another one this morning here a little bit ago. So if you're on the Irish Breakdown message board, you already know what I'm about to say. But
it's at irishbreakdown.com. Go sign up, by the way.
That's right. $4.99 a month, $49.99 a year. Plus you get some perks and benefits with that.
Yes, sir.
But the interesting thing that I found out, Ryan, is that Notre Dame actually wants Tyler Buchner back. They don't want him to leave. They want him to stay. This is a much different situation than the Lorenzo Styles and situation where, when he said he's going to leave, they're like, all right, best of luck to you, and they were ready. I think they were ready to move on. With Tyler, they don't want him to leave. And for reasons is because he did have a really good spring. I know some fans who don't like Tyler are going to look at the blue gold game and be like, he sucks, and just ignore the only focus on 3 passes in the bowl game. I get all that. There's people like that. It is what it is. But the reality is he did have a great spring, and Notre Dame does view him as a potential future player quarterback. Right now, Sam Hartman's, as we've said all along, Sam Hartman was not brought in here to sit the bench. Tyler made him work. Tyler's presence makes it better. I think he should have left. Don't think he should have left. Think it was a bad decision. So he goes and gets on a plane, I was told last night, and heads to Tuscaloosa. He's doing a visit there. Basically, what this is going to come down to is it's going to be Alabama, or it's going to come back to Notre Dame. Those are the two things that we're hearing. I don't believe a decision has been made yet. My understanding is some of his teammates are encouraging him to stay, and that Tyler is receptive to staying. I'm not going to get into why he jumped in the portal or who might be influencing it, because I haven't been able to get good enough confirmation on that. I know what some people have told me, but I haven't been able to get close enough to the source to feel comfortable that that's intel that I'm comfortable sharing and putting out there. But I'll just say this, that Tyler wasn't necessarily, from what I was told now by about 5 different people, Tyler wasn't necessarily gung-ho about wanting to go into the portal. And so he is part of the reason that the window is open, because he wanted the window to be still open to come back. So he's going to go to Alabama. Now, this does not mean that he's coming back to Notre Dame. I'm very clear. I'm not saying he's definitely coming back to Notre Dame. What I'm telling you right now, Ryan, is right this second, there's a much better shot than you and I said yesterday.
Sure.
When we basically said, look, guys, don't go in the portal and come back. It just doesn't happen. And at least it rarely happens. And somebody brought up, what about Houston Griffith? Well, the situation there was Houston jumped in the portal, then Marcus Freeman got hired, then Marcus Freeman convinced him to come back. There is not that extenuating circumstance here like there was there.
Right.
Except that what we're being told is that Tyler wasn't necessarily gung-ho about getting in the portal. he didn't need to be convinced to stay. Like, like some of these other kids, the kids wanted to leave and the parents are trying to convince them to stay. I think in this kid's situation, I don't think Tyler was necessarily gung-ho about jumping in. That doesn't mean that he still won't leave. Obviously, he has a great relationship with Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees recruited him at Notre Dame. They've known each other. I mean, he committed as a sophomore.
Yep.
And he's now a junior and, going into his junior year. That's at least 5 years that him and Tommy Rees have known, at least 6 years that him and Tommy Rees have known each other. So there's a lot of faith and trust there. Although I think for me, and we'll dive into kind of the pros and cons to both decisions, Ryan, but I wanted to kind of get that out there that's kind of what we're hearing. That there, again, I think right now at best it's 50-50 at best. So I'm just being honest. I don't want to get people's hopes up that want him to stay, that he's that this is kind of what he's going to do. But right now there's at least a chance that he stays based on, and again, we just so people understand how we work, we don't get stuff from one person and run with it unless the intel we're dropping is on that one person, right? And so we're, if somebody calls me and says, hey, I'm hearing such and such about someone, right, then we spend our time, okay, let's go get sources close to this situation. Unless it's coming from someone involved, and even then at times we'll say, okay, let's get the other side of the story. And so when we hear this information last night, okay, that kind of, and then I'm reaching out to sources today, like, hey, this is what I'm hearing. What are you hearing? Yeah, it's kind of what I'm hearing too, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case. And it was kind of interesting too. And a lot of the info that I first got was like, there's no fractured locker room. Kids like Tyler, nobody's upset with him for leaving. That there's no issues there. And now it starts to make sense. Like, they know that this wasn't a typical transfer situation. At least that's what it seems to me.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very interesting situation, Ryan. It's just overall. But, what I want to do real quick before we move on to our next topic is I do want to address some of the pros and cons to both situations at this point in time. And then also explain, why Notre Dame would want him back. Because I'll say the same thing. I have an issue with publicly saying that a kid has the option of coming back. I have an issue with that because I think that sets a bad precedent.
Yep.
But some people are taking that and disagreeing it in a way that does not reflect or represent what I said. What I said yesterday is what I believe now. I have no problem with them telling Tyler he can come back. I would have said, don't put that out there publicly.
Right.
Because it sets a precedent. And say, well, it's an individual case. I understand it's an individual case. I get that. But do you think the player that wants to do that in the future is going to understand that it's an individual case? Or is he going to say, well, why would you do it for that kid and not for me? And now you've created a problem.
Right.
And so that's the part. That's the only thing I didn't like. I don't like doing it publicly. Telling a kid, hey, look, man, I know you got to do what you got to do, but we'd love to have you back. Right. So you go put your notice out. We don't need to tell everybody that you have that open door, but you have that open door. That's all I'm saying. I would have handled it. But we also made the case yesterday, and I did in an article today, that the best thing for Notre Dame is still for Tyler Buchner to come back for 2023, and I would argue 2024. So we'll see if he does. I don't know if he will. I just think that right now, I feel like there's a better shot of that happening than I did about 24 hours ago when we were talking about this same topic about 24 hours ago. So that's the latest intel on the Tyler Buchner thing, Ryan.
I mean, not to rehash our conversation as much yesterday, Brian, but I mean, kind of just sitting on it for a night and be able to sleep on it a little bit and just kind of wrap my mind around every aspect of it. I don't feel much different than I did yesterday. I mean, selfishly, I would love Tyler Buchner back because I think he's a really talented kid, and it helps you not only 2023 from a security issue of lack of depth at quarterback, not lack of depth, but lack of proven depth, I should say, right? Guys that could come in and can play in 2023.
I think you can say depth though, Ryan, because you don't want to have just 3 scholarship quarterbacks on your roster.
Right.
So, I mean, saying lack of depth, I think your concern is, Ryan, are you concerned when you say lack of depth that comes across as the kids there aren't talented?
Yeah, it's saying like it's
numbers wise, they need 4.
Right.
And that's your point.
I guess my depth conversation is more from a proven conversation, right? Like guy that for sure is going to be a really good backup, if nothing else, in 2023 at least, right? Like what's the floor for Tyler Buchner? If God forbid something happens to Sam Hartman, if he is returning, he's a really good backup quarterback who has, the last time we saw him, again, we scored 5 touchdowns the last time we saw him. It's not like he can't play, right? So I think 2023, the immediacy of that bump in as far as proven production in the quarterback room, we talk about, again, 2024 opportunities, 2025 opportunities. If he's bought in and he sticks around to potentially be the starting quarterback or at least compete to be the starting quarterback at the University of Notre Dame, feel the same in that environment, Brian. I mean, honestly, I have come to peace with it, though, if he decides not to come back, right? Like, this is one of those things where it would be great if he doesn't, but
does.
I mean, it's already, or does, excuse me. But if it's already out in the universe, it's like something that's on the table, right? So like, I can't do anything about that anymore. So if it happens, it happens.
You wish
if he decides to come back, that's awesome. And I'll be happy that his talent is back in the room without a doubt.
So let's kind of dive quickly, Ryan, into the pros and cons of each of these things. So let's start with Alabama. Yeah. I think the pro going to Alabama is he's going to a coach that he knows. I mean, there's not a coach in college football that Tyler Buchner has a closer relationship than Tommy Rees.
Yep.
And relationships matter. And so if Tommy Rees tells him, hey, you're going to get a chance to play, or you're going to be our starter, or hey, you got a battle, but I think you're better than these guys, then he knows he's getting told the truth.
Yep.
And he knows he's getting shot straight. And he knows that if Tommy Rees or Alabama doesn't think he can play there, or if they're only bringing him in for depth, I believe that Tyler Buchner believes that Tommy Rees would be honest with him about that. And I believe that Tommy Rees would be honest with him about that. And so if Alabama says, hey, you're got a chance to come here and be the guy, then I think Tyler would trust that and believe that there's certainly an opportunity that happens. So, I think if you want to say why would he consider leaving, it's that right there. It's I'd have a chance to go be a starter at Alabama, where right. I know, because let's be honest about something like, yes, there was a quarterback competition, right, or quarterback battle, and because Notre Dame was going to give him a chance to compete. But as we said all along, he was going to have to be so much better than Sam Hartman to win that job, and he wasn't. Sam Hartman was going to be the starting quarterback. We have said that from day one. This was about Tyler learning from Sam and then developing, being ready if Sam goes down, and then, of course, having a chance. I mean, he's the leader in the clubhouse going into 2024 as the starting quarterback. Now everybody's got to chase him. So I think going to Alabama, you've got a chance to be that guy there, but you don't have that same built-up sort of reputation with the locker room that you have at Notre Dame. Tyler's not a kind of guy like Sam Hartman. Really, to me, well, let's stick with the pros. Bama system, coach you trust. He's going to still be surrounded by really good talent. I think we could debate who has the better offensive roster. I think that's debatable. For me, it is debatable anyway. But it's at least a conversation to have. So he's going to be talent no matter where he goes.
Yep.
And of course, he's going to get a play for Nick Saban as well. I mean, those are pluses for me, Ryan.
Yep.
Cons for me, and I'll let you kind of share yours after this. The cons for me is, number one, is there's no way Alabama is going to be able to promise him a starting job and not tear that locker room up. And I have to think Tyler's smart enough to know that, because he was on the other side of that. Yep. He knows how he would have felt if, when Sam Hartman came in, Notre Dame said, hey, look, Tyler, we love you, but Sam's the starter. Well, what if I go play with Sam's the starter? Sorry. Right? Like that. So now you're risking going to a place where you don't know the players. You're not on the same page with them. You know the offense to a degree, but there's things that Alabama's doing that is going to do that Nick Saban likes that Notre Dame didn't do. There's going to be some learning curve. You're learning the team. You're learning everything. It's all new to you. And that's a tough transition to make. And the other part is, I don't know how Tyler Buchner is going to fit at Alabama. I really have questions about his personality fit in Tuscaloosa. I always say this: if you think Notre Dame fans are tough,
yep,
go play for an SEC school and have a game where you throw 2 pick sixes. You know what I mean? So that's the thing for me is there's pros and cons to it. But I just I said yesterday, I don't think the Alabama fit makes a lot of sense for me, other than, but like this: if Tommy Rees wasn't in Alabama, we're not having this conversation
at all,
because there's no other fit for him. No other fit for him, in my opinion.
Well, and Brian, I would say this too. Another negative against the Alabama conversation versus Notre Dame is that you have to also understand what the room is around you, right? Because if Tyler Buchner goes to Alabama, and let's say Ty Simpson beats him out, right, to be the starting quarterback. Well, what classification is Ty Simpson? It's going to be a redshirt freshman, right? What if Jalen Milroe beats him out? He's a redshirt sophomore. We're talking about guys that have multiple
Dylan Lonergan's
years.
a true freshman, and I've heard he had a great spring.
Lonergan,
He's
I know
really talented.
Eli Holstein is going to be another true freshman in that room as well. I get it, but my point is that is a young room of quarterbacks.
I was more focusing on guys that are actually good.
Oh, okay, my bad. My point is there's a young group of quarterbacks. So if Tyler does not win the starting job, whoever does win the starting job, it's probably going to be a multi-year starter at Alabama, right?
That's a good point, Ryan.
So if you're Tyler,
it's not like Sam Hartman, who's
exactly
done after this year. That's a good point.
I don't want to say the worst case, but the track that it could be on for Tyler Buchner if he stays at Notre Dame is that you sit behind behind Sam Hartman for a year, and then you're the guy, right? Like that's the track. You're talking about a 6-year senior quarterback or fighting for a starting job with a redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore, and 2 true freshmen. Like there's a possibility that you could lose 2 years of playing time and not just 1 if you stay at Notre Dame as far as being a starter. So if we're talking about the negatives there, I think that, again, yes, things can get promised. But to your point, Brian, if something's promised, and let's say Tyler is not the best quarterback in the room during the summer and the fall, then there's going to be a locker room issue. There is, because kids aren't stupid, right? They're going to look at it and be like, hey, man, I know Tyler's pretty talented, but like Ty Simpson's been here for 2 years, and we thought Ty was just as good as him this year. You know what I mean? So I think that's the other big drawback from this is that we're talking about windows of how many years you could potentially be a starter. Tyler could lose 2 years as a backup potentially. And Notre Dame, he's going to lose potentially just 1, most likely.
I want to address something, too, regarding the Alabama side. Nathan Milton says, why would Tyler Buchner trust Tommy Rees? Tommy Rees is the one who brought in Sam Hartman. But he was honest with Tyler. He told Tyler in December, we're bringing in Drew Pine wasn't the only guy told in beginning of December that they're bringing a transfer quarterback.
Right.
Here's what y'all have to understand. Most kids respect honesty. And matter of fact, they would much rather you be honest with them at the end of the day than tell them what they want to hear. And part of the reason that Drew Pine made the decision he made is because he was told the truth, and the truth didn't work for him. And it's not that he was upset that, I hate Tommy Rees. It's just like, no, this doesn't work for me. And he felt he deserved the right to be the starting quarterback. I disagree with him, but they were honest with him about where things stood. And so there's no ill will towards being told the truth. And he was given a chance to compete. Just being told, hey, we're bringing in Sam Hartman. Like, okay, it's where there would have been a lack of trust as if they would have said, hey, man, no, don't worry. You're the guy. You're the guy. We just need to bring in a portal guy for depth. You're the guy. Don't worry about it. You're the guy. You're the guy. You're the guy. And then, bam, Sam Hartman comes. Oh, by the way, I know we told you you're the guy, but you're going to have to compete for the job now. That's where you lose trust. But they were told right away, look, we're bringing in this guy, and we're going to bring in the best guy that we can. Yes, you're going to get a chance to compete, but there's no promises. I think Tyler respected that because he was told the truth. So that's why he trusts Tommy Rees. Because sometimes guys, look, trust sometimes is actually, I would argue most of the trust is built or should be trust. If you're someone who can't be told the truth and it's not good news or it's not something you like and you respond poorly to that, that's on you. You're the problem. Because most legitimate trust and connection and bond is built through me knowing that this person will tell me the hard truth sometimes. If you don't have friends that are willing to tell you sometimes that that what you're doing is not right or wrong or is wrong or what, then you don't have good friends. You don't have real friends. You don't have people you can trust. And that's where I think that relationship comes from, because he did tell him the hard truth. Hey, look, man, this is what we're going to do. So I just want to make sure that we address that part of it as well. Let's talk about the Notre Dame side thing, Ryan. Let's start with the cons. The cons are, you're not going to be the starting quarterback right now, barring an injury. You've basically kind of removed yourself from the starting quarterback conversation by going in the portal, in my opinion. You are probably not going to be the starter anyway, as we've said all along. You didn't bring in the 19th all-time leading passer in NCAA history and 18th all-time in touchdown passes to provide insurance for Tyler Buchner. Tyler Buchner is the insurance for Sam Hartman. That's just a fact. Tyler was given a chance to compete, and I don't believe he beat Sam Hartman out. I know other people reported it. We gave our opinions on how we just strongly disagreed with that. But by jumping in the portal now, basically he's conceded defeat, essentially.
Yep.
Now, I hope that he comes back, because the whole reason to bring Tyler Buchner back, and these are the pros for Notre Dame and then for Tyler. The pros for Notre Dame are twofold. Well, really, one is bringing back Tyler Buchner means you have a starting caliber quarterback at your number 2 spot. So if something happens to Tyler Buchner, or excuse me, Sam Hartman, you now have Tyler Buchner, who started 3 games. He won you the Gator Bowl. He was the guy that you expected to be your starter last year, and a guy that you believe is very talented. And that's great for Notre Dame. The pros for Tyler Buchner, in my opinion, Ryan, and I don't even know if he even knows this yet, it's what you and I talked about when Sam Hartman first got hired or brought in. I'm having a tough time today saying the words I want to say. It's not good. Need more sleep tonight. It's if Tyler Buchner embraces Sam Hartman being here the right way, this is going to be a great opportunity for him to learn, because everything that Tyler needs to improve upon, Sam is really good at.
Yep.
And so I think, yes, he won't start next year, and barring injury, but I believe he'll become a much better quarterback. And this is the discussion we had with Scott L yesterday. Sometimes playing, practice is even better for you, because you're trying to adjust and change your style of play. Where when you're playing on Saturdays, I got to get just ready to go win and be the best I can be. Now it's like, take a step back, get out of spotlight. Let's work on these parts of your game that still clearly need improved, because we saw him reverting back to some old bad habits in the blue gold game, right? That he just did. So clearly he still needs work there. So I think for him, that's the pro. And then you still have 2 years, potentially 2 years, to be a starting quarterback at Notre Dame, which you and I broke down yesterday. 2 years of starting experience at a place like Notre Dame is plenty, because 3 of the top 4 starting quarterbacks that are going to be drafted this weekend are 2-year starters or less, right? And so what was Trey Lance? Wasn't he like a 1-year starter?
1 year, 1 game. Yep.
Right. And then Zach Wilson was what, a 2-year starter? And one of those years was pretty freaking awful, I believe.
I think he was a 2.5, but either way, it's still pretty close. Yeah.
And I think he would have the year before his breakout year, he had 11 touchdowns, 11 picks, something like that. Right.
Yeah,
so it's not like he had multiple good years of playing. Mac Jones was a starter for a grand total of 1 year in 3 games?
Something like that. Yeah.
Right. 3-4 games. So there's a very long history in the last 5 to 10 years of, you don't need to be a 1-year starter at quarterback was picked over Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson in the same draft. I mean, you know what I mean? So 2 years as a starter at Notre Dame, if Tyler's goal is to be an NFL quarterback, is still there. There's no question. And he'll be a better quarterback for it, in my opinion, because I think that as much as Tyler may love Tommy Rees, there's no track record for Tommy Rees developing a quarterback like Tyler.
Sure.
This isn't a shot at Tommy Rees. It's just the fact. Who's the 2 most successful quarterbacks that he's had in Notre Dame? Jack Cohn and Ian Book. They're not like Tyler. No. Gino Guidugli, however, has a track record of producing a quarterback like Tyler. This isn't a knock that Tommy Rees can't develop quarterbacks. It's more of the guys that have thrived under Tommy are not like Tyler. It's a fact. And so maybe Tommy would have done it, but we don't know. We didn't get to see that opportunity because Tommy left for Alabama. But Gino took a guy like Desmond Ridder, who is much more like Tyler than Jack Cohn is or Ian Book is, and turned him into now you and I we didn't love Desmond Ridder. I still don't love Desmond Ridder, but you can't deny how much technical improvement he made over the course of his 4 years as a starter.
And he was a really good college quarterback.
Yes,
really
it was obvious that Desmond put in the work, and it was obvious that he was coached, right? And Desmond's a lot more similar as a style of play, the things that need to be worked on to Tyler than the guys that Notre Dame had in the past. So I think, to me, again, those are the reasons why it would make sense for Tyler to come back, in my opinion. He just has to accept the fact that I'm not going to be the starter unless something happens. But this is a chance for me to grow my game, develop myself, and then be ready to be the starting quarterback in Notre Dame for 2 years. That's to me, that's the reality of it. But that's a big con, though. If you're a competitive kid,
yes,
and the top con is I'm not starting, that's a pretty big con, in my opinion. So I get that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't think anybody's okay with not playing, right? Like I mean, because if you are okay with not playing, I think that that's a little bit of an issue, right? Like, I mean, there's a fundamental understanding of like what a track is, right? As far as I have a fifth-year senior in front of me who's a really good player. I'm a true freshman. I need a year of maturation. Then that's my job, right? Like, I don't think that you should be unrealistic with those expectations. But if I'm Tyler Buchner and I'm like, this is my third year in the system and I was the starter last year and the only thing that stopped me was an injury, then my expectation should be that I want to play football. I don't think that it's unrealistic to have those types of high expectations for yourself. So I think that for me, Brian, like, again, from the Notre Dame perspective, as long as everybody is good with it, right, and you were comfortable, why would you not want Tyler Buchner back? I mean, like, that's kind of where it comes down to it. I mean, the kid is talented, obviously. He's a player that you have a high opinion of as a talent. And I've never heard anything about Tyler negatively as a person. Never heard one single thing about a negative part of him as a teammate, as a young man. Like, he has a really good track record and a reputation as far as that. So as long as the team is comfortable with it, the coaching staff is comfortable with it, and they understand that, like, this isn't a precedent that was set. This is a unique situation. That's something that the team really has to put out there, man, and really have people understand if the decision is made to come back. So it'll be interesting, man. We're not done talking Tyler Buchner here, folks. We're not done talking about it.
We were.
It's a long way away.
I thought we were. So that's going to do it for this part of it, Ryan. Obviously, we'll have any more intel we get. Obviously, we'll put on the board. I reached out to some people today and was like, if I report on this, is it going to, what are your thoughts on this? Is this real? Is this legit? And everybody I talked to said, yeah. I mean, again, we're not saying it's going to happen. It's 50-50 at best, but there's at least a more open window today than there was yesterday. And honestly, again, it is best for Notre Dame. But at the end of the day, Tyler Buchner has to do what's best for Tyler Buchner. Now that you're in the portal, do what's best for you. My argument is I still believe that being at Notre Dame is still what's best for Tyler. It's not just about what's best for Notre Dame. I also think that's best for Tyler. And sometimes, Ryan, look, and you and I have been there. We were high school football players. I think we were probably both pretty good high school football players. We were recruited to play college football.
Yep. And
you know, tell you what, I remember my first year sitting on the bench was my sophomore year at college, and that was not fun. And I understood why. I'm transitioning. I'm moving back to quarterback. I started as a freshman receiver. I'm moving back to quarterback. I understood the reasons why, but didn't make it any easier. Looking back, I understood the reasons for it. In Tyler's case, it's even more beneficial for him if he decides to stay. So we'll have more, but most of the intel we'll have on this, we're not going to lead off every show now talking about Tyler Buchner. But this was definitely noteworthy, and if there's any more that we have, we'll put that on the message board, which is why you need to subscribe, folks. I'm telling you, you're not going to regret it. boards.irishbreakdown.com. So Ryan, let's talk about our next topic. And we told people last week that we would talk about this, right? And we would talk about ESPN's Football Power Index.
Yes.
So obviously ESPN came out with their Football Power Index last week and kind of ranked their teams. I think it was a top 25, right? The FPI top 25.
They actually had everybody ranked all the way down to UMass, okay. Brian. All the way down to UMass.
UMass is still a Division I team, huh?
Yes, FBS independent, man, just like Notre Dame. So, yeah.
I was kind of being a little bit sarcastic on that. And so they had Notre Dame ranked 9th.
Yep.
Which I thought was interesting. And I wanted to kind of go through, we're going to discuss where Notre Dame is ranked, whether we think it's fair or not. And then kind of dive into just the rest of the rankings and really focusing more on the top 25, who is in the top 25 and who is not, but should be kind of thing. And I'll kind of just have you kick it off, Ryan, with just your overall thoughts of Notre Dame. They had Notre Dame basically picked 9th with a projected 9-3 record, essentially. Their projected win-loss is 9.1 and 2.9.
Yes.
Their percentage to win the playoff, to make the playoff, is 15.8, which is significantly lower than the teams ahead of them. Make the national championship game 5.1 and win a title is 1.6. The couple things I noticed, Ryan, the 9-3 record, number one, makes sense because they have 3 teams that Notre Dame plays ranked ahead of them. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
The thing that I found interesting too is there's the big gap between, so like if you look at numbers 4 through 8, their chances of making the playoff, it's 23-7, 34-2, 25-9, 24-7, 24-2. Then Notre Dame at 15.8. And then the next lowest is Penn State and Oklahoma tied at 10.7. Moral story is, to ESPN's Football Power Index, there's a big gap between 8 and 9 and then 9 and 10.
Yes.
So Notre Dame's kind of in this, I found that really fascinating. They're in this island all by themselves. They're not close to the teams ahead of them, and they're pretty significantly ahead of the teams behind them. I thought that was very interesting. But overall thoughts on where you see Notre Dame in the Football Power Index, and then we'll dive into the others here in a minute.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, because you look at the teams ahead of them, and I mean, if I could just go through the top 10 real quick, just for people that don't have it. So we have Ohio State come in at number 1, Alabama at number 2, Georgia at 3, LSU at 4, Texas at 5, Michigan at 6, USC at 7, Clemson at 8, Notre Dame at 9, and then Penn State rounds out number 10. I mean, for me, Brian, like all this is basically attributed based upon what is the returning production to a football team? What did the team do last season? And then obviously you are kind of parlaying what the production is coming back versus the teams on your schedule, and kind of to determine what the outcomes is going to be for a season. Like that's kind of how
let me just go ahead and read this real quick, Ryan. I should have done this at the beginning. It's my fault. But this is what ESPN has on their site. The Football Power Index, the FPI, is a measure of team strength that is meant to be the best predictor of a team's performance going forward for the rest of the season. FPI represents how many points above or below average a team is. Projected results are based on 20,000 simulations of the rest of the season using FPI results to date and the remaining schedule. Ratings and projections update daily. FPI data from seasons prior to 2019 may not be complete. So that's basically what they're looking for and looking at. And since we have the entire season to look at, it's projecting out the entire season. And then the four teams ahead of it's what I found fascinating too is the 4 teams ahead of them are all projected to basically go 10-2 or 10-3, basically 10-2. They have LSU is strange because they have LSU at basically 9.6 and 2.6, which is 10-3, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And then Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State, or Georgia, they have 12-1, basically rounding up 11.7 to 11.2. Yep. Bama 11.1 and 11.6. So it's like they have way too many games for some of these teams. There's no way that Alabama, LSU, and Georgia can all play 13 games. You know what I mean? In the regular season. But, I mean, just taking Notre Dame out of context without looking what's around them, ahead or below them, 9 is fair. I think having Notre Dame outside the top 10 is not something I would do. But as long as they're within the top 13, I'm not going to bash you for it.
Sure.
You know, because you're talking about a team went 9-4 last year, lost to Stanford and lost to Marshall. Now, I think Notre Dame's going to be a lot better. They got a quarterback in that to make them a lot better. But the counter argument, if I'm a non-Notre Dame person, is, yeah, but that guy was a quarterback on like an 8-5 football team, right?
Sure.
Now, that's out of context as well. But the reality is that Notre Dame has a lot to prove this year before I'm going to argue that they should be not ranked higher than 9th with no context, right? With no context. So I think the FPI ranking of number 9 is fair, Ryan, with no other context to look at. Now, when you throw in the context, that's where the conversation becomes a little bit like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, because the baseline is that, and this is just the starting point, right? Like there's a much more nuanced and a longer delivery to this conversation, but every team that's in front of Notre Dame had a better record than them last year, right? Like that's the baseline, is that Notre Dame went 9-4 last year. Every team in front of them won double-digit games. And then obviously at the top, we're talking about Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, who all made the college football play. Actually, I'm sorry, Alabama did not make the college football playoff, but you know what I'm saying there. Like they're all competitive to potentially be in the college football playoff down the stretch of the season. So all the teams had better records than Notre Dame in the 2022 version. 2023, I think that this is where the conversation becomes very, and I don't know how they determine this, honestly, Brian, because you just mentioned something that I think is key, is that you do get Sam Hartman into this conversation, right? You do. So how do you appropriately put into the formula transfers coming in, transfers coming out. And because, like, we talked about it, right? Numbers at Notre Dame are probably not going to be quite as gaudy as what they were at Wake Forest, but
At
that
least
doesn't
not
mean
the
that it's not.
2021 numbers. I think
Exactly.
I think he's capable of repeating last year's overall numbers. Having said that, I'm talking about total raw numbers.
Yes.
Because Sam Hartman doing the same number, his yards per game average didn't change much last year. He just played fewer games.
Right.
And that's why the numbers change. But if you go look at Sam Hartman's actual per game statistics, he averaged in 2021, he averaged 302 yards per game. And that allowed him to get to 4,228 yards, but he played 14 games. Last year, only played 12 games and had 3,700 yards passing, 3,701, but he actually averaged 308 yards per game. So when I talk about I'm not talking about 308 yards per game. I think that'll be tough because of the nature of Notre Dame's offense. He's certainly capable of it, but I think Notre Dame will be more of a 275 to 230 type of team if they're going to be if they are that explosive. But the raw numbers is what I think is comparable, Ryan. The 2022 raw numbers.
Right.
I think for Sam Hartman to throw for 4,200 yards, Notre Dame's, I mean, if he does do that, they're going to be really flipping good. But it would be more of they make the playoff and then win the semifinal, and then, you know what I mean? It gets back to he's going to play 14 games again. That's how I see the only way I see that one happening.
And obviously factoring into this FPI ranking, we're talking about a 12-game sample size because, like you said, you're predicting basically 9-3 for Notre Dame. So I would love to dig a little deeper into the people that obviously do this formula, right, and how they find these numbers. Because, again, Sam Hartman to Notre Dame in a vacuum is a big plus, right, especially when you're talking about what Notre Dame had in 2022 compared to what they could have in 2023. But my biggest question is, how do they take those numbers and associate it properly with what it will look like at Notre Dame? Because that's such a question mark, right?
That's
like you don't 100% know what it's going to look like. That's why I have
if we're
an issue
being
with
fair,
some of these
Ryan,
formulas sometimes.
If we're being fair, I mean, look, we could sit there and say, well, they went 9-4 last year. But if you put Sam Hartman on the team last year, they beat Stanford. They beat Marshall. They might even beat Ohio State. That's subjective, though. I don't know that to be a fact. I have no clue. Maybe they do beat those teams, but they lose to someone. Maybe they lose to Clemson because they would have been more reliant on passing the ball. And then you get that weather the way that it was, and they hadn't built their offensive line up to the point that it did against Clemson to where they could rely on the run game the way that it. I mean, I don't think that would have been the case, but I could make just as legitimate of a football argument for that as I could. Okay, so they beat Stanford, but they lose to Clemson. Right. I mean, because the offensive line would have gone into that windy game, that cold, windy night, relying too heavily on the pass, and the O-line wouldn't have been developed the way that it was because the O-line had to become that good.
Yep.
All right. I don't necessarily believe that, but that you could make that argument, and it's just as factual as the other argument that we just made. Right. And but I would argue too, Ryan, that I think part of the reason that they have Notre Dame 9th is because of Sam Hartman. I think if Sam Hartman doesn't come to Notre Dame, you could make a case that they'd be actually lower than that. So I believe they are factoring in the transfer aspect of having Notre Dame 9th, in my opinion, because they're clearly projecting teams. Like, this is what's interesting. They say, it's based on past performance, but it's not really based on past performance completely.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, and this is where we can kind of talk about the whole list now, Ryan, if it's based on past performance, you don't have LSU 4th and Texas 5th.
Yeah, Texas was the weird one for me, man.
And even LSU's being 4th is too high.
Yes.
Because they weren't that good last year. So you're projecting them to be better than they were last. So again, there's reason to make that case. They're bringing back their quarterback, and they're almost their entire coaching staff is back. And there's a lot of different factors to kind of go into this. But that's too high. But the Texas one especially is like, okay, you're really taking a leap of faith there. And I don't know that you have the same justification for jumping Texas all the way up to 5th that you do for Notre Dame, because Texas doesn't have a new transfer quarterback like Sam Hartman coming. I mean, Texas won 8-5 last year, man.
Yep.
I mean, they lost. They were competitive against Alabama, but they still lost. They lost to Texas Tech. They lost to Oklahoma State. They lost to TCU, and they lost to Washington in a bowl game. So my whole thing is, how are you going to have Texas 5th and you're going to have Washington all the way down at 21. And when last year, Washington, I would argue, has more production coming back, has better top-level talent coming back, with all due respect to Xavier Worthy. If you're comparing Texas and Washington, Washington is the better quarterback. They have the better receivers. And I would argue that you could make a case they might even have better running backs because Texas lost their top 2 guys from last year. So what's the argument to have Texas 5th and have Washington 21st if we're looking at last year in sight? Because Texas won 8-5 last year, got beat by Washington, who went 11-2 last year. So there's clearly some leaps of faith being taken in these rankings. LSU's not a leap of faith. That's just a slight overranking. I mean, they should be in the bottom of the top 10. I'm not banging the table saying, oh my, this is crazy having LSU 4th. I think it's too high. Yeah. And I also think it's too, if we're looking at past production, having Michigan behind LSU and Texas and Ohio State, if we're talking about past production, doesn't make a lot of sense.
Especially because Michigan has a lot coming back, too. It's not like they lost a ton. Yeah. I mean, you lost Mike Morris as a defensive end who was a solid player. You lost DJ Turner, who was a solid to good corner. And you lost, Ryan Hayes in your center. But, you have some guys coming back, man. I mean, your starting quarterback's coming back. Your 2 best running backs are coming back. Your best corner from last year was coming back. I mean, Michigan has a lot coming back this year. So I think that Michigan should be ranked a spot or 2 higher, in my opinion. I agree with you 100% on that one. Some of these are this is why the past production conversation gets a little weird to me sometimes, because it's also not all past productions created equal, right? It's like if I have a percentage of, if I have one team with a higher percentage of returning production, let's say, and one that's lower, but the returning production on the lower team is quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, it's but that's maybe a little bit more important than them returning both their starting safeties next year. You know what I mean? Or just their starting guards or their running backs. I just think there's some context that we missed there. Some reactions, though, I think Florida State should be a little bit higher, to be honest. What are we looking at there? We're looking at 14th. I mean, it should be a couple spots higher in my estimation.
You know what? Let's do this. I think this will be kind of good. Let's start with the top 10, right? And kind of go through it, because I think that so who should be in it? Because to your point, number 1, Ohio State should not be number 1. I'm sorry. No. They should not be number 1. They have to play at Michigan and at Notre Dame this year. And you're talking about a team that Michigan has not only beat the last 2 years, but has beaten thoroughly. It's not like Michigan squeaked out a couple last-second field goals to beat Ohio State. They physically beat Ohio State behind the last 2 years. That's been close.
Especially last year.
And if you look at what Michigan's losing, they're losing some good players, but Ohio State lost a guy that's going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick at quarterback.
Yes.
They lost a guy that's going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick at offensive tackle. They lost both of their offensive tackles and their starting center.
Yeah.
Yes, they have a lot coming back, of course, but so does Michigan, in my opinion. They lost one of their starting defensive ends. I mean, so, they got a lot coming back on defense, but I would argue, again, so does Michigan. So, I mean, you look at it there. What's your rationale for having Ohio State number 1 and Georgia number 3? Okay, Ohio State lost their starting, Georgia lost their 2-time national championship quarterback. All right, cool. Yes, they did. But Georgia wasn't as reliant on Stetson Bennett as Ohio State was on C.J. Stroud. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
Say that.
Ohio State relied on C.J. Stroud a lot more than Georgia relied on Stetson Bennett on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't get that one. Alabama number 2. I expect that. I'm okay with Alabama number 2. I wouldn't have Alabama number 2 in my preseason top 25. I'd have them a little bit lower. But, it's Alabama. They're going to be in there every year. But I'd have Georgia 1, and I wouldn't even be necessarily opposed to having Ohio State number 2. I wouldn't have them there. They got to prove they can beat Michigan first. You can't be ranked number 1 overall if you're not even the best team in your conference. And for the last 2 years, they haven't been the best team in their conference.
Sure.
And not really close to the best team in their conference, because the best team in their conference has kicked their butts the last 2 years at their place and at the other team's place. And you've got to go back to their place this year. So to me, as much as I hate it, Michigan should be higher. If we're basing this off recent production and then returning production, Michigan returns one of the best backfields in the country.
Yep.
So you can't say Ohio State's ahead of them there. They bring back most of their receiver production. really good tight end production. Their offensive line's in a much healthier place than Ohio State's is. They returned their starting quarterback, and they returned most of their best players on defense. Like Michigan's draft class this year, Ryan, is not going to be big. It's not going to be that big. And it's partly because they didn't lose. They lost some good players, but they didn't lose a lot of guys.
Yeah, I mean, they lost like day 3 level prospects this year. I mean, like good players, like Ronnie Bell's a good receiver. Like Mike Morris is a solid defensive end. Olu Oluwatimi is a good center, but he's not going to be like a high level draft pick. Like good football.
And they
players,
replaced him with a guy that people view as a preseason first team All-American. Now, again, I don't think he's that good, but the perception is there. And then where you did lose players, you've already found your replacements. Where Ohio State's coming out of the spring, like, I don't know who the replacements are going to be for our offensive tackles. We may have to go to the portal. Where Michigan's like, we already did that. We're good. Yeah. We already went to the portal and got the most talented, physically gifted tackle in the portal. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I said it before, man. On the hoof, that kid looks like a top 20 NFL draft pick. It's just, you have to develop him, obviously.
God-gifted offensive lineman that Michigan's had in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, will he be the
probably
best
probably the most talented since what? Taylor Decker, maybe? Like it's been a while.
Well, Taylor Lewan. Yeah.
I'll tell you what I meant. I meant
Lewan.
Decker was Ohio State.
I knew what you meant. Yeah.
Yep.
And Taylor Decker wasn't that long ago, so it wouldn't have had the same impact. But yes, so I still have Georgia number 1. LSU 4, I don't agree with, but it's not one that I'm going to argue with somebody about. Right? They were the SEC West champs last year. They beat Bama. So if you're going to have Bama in the top 4, then you need to be willing to make the case for LSU to be in the top 4. I wouldn't, right? I mean, they lost to Texas A&M. They got destroyed by Tennessee. But LSU does have a lot coming back. And what they did last year was with the first-year coach. They returned almost the entire coaching staff. So I think those are reasons why you could make the case for LSU in the top 5. I personally probably wouldn't put them there. But it's not one I'm going to pound the table on and say, no way. I think it's more egregious to have Ohio State number 1 than LSU number 4, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was completely fine with the LSU thing. Like, maybe 1 spot lower, 2 spots. Like, I mean, we could talk about those semantics, but
3-4 spots. That's it.
100%. I mean, because at the end of the day, you return your starting quarterback. Most of your offensive line's returning. Your best wide receiver from last year's returning. Harold Perkins, obviously sophomore, potentially taking a big step up.
You got rid of the biggest cancer on your roster. I mean, you did. Say what you want, but you did. You got rid of the biggest cancer on your roster. That helps.
Yep.
So, and they brought in some freshmen that can help now, in my opinion. Shelton Sampson can play for you right now, in my opinion. I mean, I've made that case before. The biggest top 10 that I just saw and was like, that's insane, was Texas at 5.
Yeah.
And they have Texas going basically rounding up 10-3, 10.1 and 2.6. They must think the Big 12 is awful if they're going to have Texas that high, and which they don't. I mean, they have like 5 Big 12 teams in the top 25.
They have Oklahoma that also would rank up to 10-3 as well. Right there, I'm looking at number 11.
Oklahoma at 11.
Yeah,
they have TCU at 17. Mm-hmm. They have Texas Tech at 22 and Baylor at 24. Kansas State at 27. So they have 5 other Big 12 teams in the top 30. And yet Texas is going to be a top 5 team against that based on what?
They must really think that's going to be a top-heavy conference then, huh? There's going to be some bottom dwellers in there.
Yeah, and then Ohio State's going to Texas is going to dominate all those teams that are behind them. Apparently. Right? Apparently.
Yeah.
So, it's a to me, I look at that and I'm like, I'm not with you on that. I can't go with you on that. I just, that's a bad ranking. Now, is Texas capable of jumping into that? Sure.
Talent-wise,
you can't. But even talent-wise, I think that I'd have a hard time buying it. They have some highly ranked guys, but there's also some gaps on that roster where Sarkisian hasn't been able to fill those things yet, in my opinion. So that's the most egregious to me.
I think the Texas hype is falling into they were only freshmen and sophomores last year. Wait for another year, sure. and sometimes that works, but a lot of times that doesn't really work that way, right? I mean, Quinn Ewers going from first-year starter as a sophomore to junior year should take a big jump in theory, right? That offensive line last year started, like 3 to 4 freshmen at times? Like, they should be better. But again, not all development is linear. I mean, we just fell into that last year with Notre Dame a little bit, didn't we? I mean, we were talking about that sophomore class this past year of, like, Lorenzo and all those guys, and it's like some of them really took a step up, but not everybody, right?
Yeah.
And you get caught in that little conversation of, yes, in theory, it'll be a lot better, but it doesn't always happen that way. So I just think that's the Texas conversation right now.
Right. Agree. That's one that I have a big problem with. USC at 7, I'm fine with. I'm fine with that. And I mean, if somebody wanted to project USC higher, because I think the Pac-12, I'm not sold on the Pac-12 being. It's going to be a very top-heavy league this year, in my opinion. Very top-heavy. There's 3 to 4 really good teams in the Pac-12, and then not a lot after that. And USC doesn't play all the teams in that top 3 or 4. And so I'm okay with that one. Clemson at 8 is another one that I had a problem with.
You want
now we're
higher?
looking with related to Notre Dame.
Okay.
So the reality is Notre Dame and Clemson have played the last 2 times they've played in the regular season. Notre Dame has won. You can put an asterisk by the one in 2020 because of the fact that there was no Trevor, no Tyler Davis, no Mike Jones, no James Skalski.
Sure.
And you still needed double overtime to beat them. Totally fine with that. Notre Dame absolutely destroyed Clemson last year. Destroyed them. It was not a competitive game. And you look at what Clemson lost compared to what Notre Dame has lost, and it's not even close. Clemson lost way more high-level guys than Notre Dame did. Notre Dame lost
Especially
2 high-level guys. That's it. Right? And then they lost some solid, Jared Patterson, solid veteran guy. Jason Adamiola, solid veteran guy. Justin Adamiola, solid veteran guy. Mayer and Foskey are the 2 studs. Clemson lost, 3 studs from their front 7 alone. I mean, potential 2 top 10 picks on the D-line alone.
I was going to say 3 potential first-rounders in the front 7. So.
And they lost KJ Henry, who was, I think, a pretty good player for them.
Yep.
So that's my issue is to have Clemson head to Notre Dame now look like, again, I'm fine with Notre Dame at 9 with no context. Sure. Within context, they should be ahead of Clemson. Now, I think if you're going to base off last year and what teams have coming back, if you want to leave Notre Dame at 9 and drop Clemson to 10 and jump Penn State up to 8, I could somewhat live with that. I think Penn State's a little overrated. I think their schedule is a little soft, though, especially compared to Notre Dame's.
Yeah.
And I think their schedule sets up somewhat favorably, and they've got some really talented players coming back as well. So I could be more sympathetic to them having Clemson. And, of course, USC needs to be ahead of Notre Dame because they whooped Notre Dame pretty good last year. I mean, we said, hey, look, Notre Dame's a play here, a play there, and they make it a game, but they didn't. They didn't make those plays, and USC did. And they were basically constantly they would score to make it single digits, and USC would go right back down and score, make it double digits again. It was not a game that how it played out, Notre Dame wasn't really competitive.
Yep.
Because whenever you have to rely on that, what if this would have happened, it would have been competitive. You're saying that because it wasn't. It wasn't competitive. And so I'm fine with USC being ahead of them, but I take umbrage with that, Ryan. I'm also with you on the Florida State ranking, having them at 14.
Man. Yeah,
they should. One of the worst rankings on there to me was the Oklahoma one. I mean, you're banking on a lot of transfers to come in and make a bad team really good.
And a lot of true freshmen, too. Freshmen, too. Yeah.
You're really banking on some newcomers making them good again. And the reality is people are going to look at USC and be like, well, USC did it. But USC did it not because they brought in a million transfers. They did it because they brought in one especially really good transfer, and that's Caleb Williams.
Yeah,
I know that maybe Roger Dodger disagree with this, and I'd be curious to kind of get his assessment. That's our USC fan who's in the chat if he's in here. But let's just say that Oklahoma gets everybody that they got last year, but Keaton Slovis is still their quarterback and Caleb Williams stays at Oklahoma. I think their records reverse. I do. I think Oklahoma is probably 10-2, and USC is probably 6-6. Because their offensive line was okay, but it was good with him.
Yes.
They don't beat Notre Dame for sure, because the reason they beat Notre Dame is because they just couldn't stop Caleb Williams from doing the He-Man stuff. The way that Notre Dame's pass rush was going in that, especially that second half, they had to eat Keaton Slovis alive. Right? I mean, Caleb Williams would put that team on his shoulders and just they don't beat Oregon State without Caleb Williams. They don't beat Washington State without Caleb Williams. They don't beat UCLA without Caleb Williams doing some some He-Man stuff, some Hercules stuff, some Superman stuff, right? Pick any superhero that you want, Captain America, whatever. He was doing stuff that you're just like, there's nobody else can do that. And he carried that team. Oklahoma doesn't have that. Who's that? Dylan Gabriel?
Yeah.
Right? Like a D tackle transfer doesn't make a 6-6 team 11-1 or 10-2. Just doesn't happen that way, in my opinion.
Oklahoma also lost a couple key players, man. I mean, we're not talking about the fact that they lost both their offensive tackles who were pretty dang good for them last year, Anton Harrison and Wanye Morris. Like, it's not like they lost a couple of important players as well. Eric Gray was a quietly good, really good football player for them last year, man, for over 1,000 yards.
Over 1,300 yards at 6.4 a pop. He's gone.
And their best wide receiver's gone,
Marvin
too.
Mims, a 1,000-yard receiver last year. You're absolutely right, Ryan. Yep. And didn't Theo Weiss also leave? He was in their top 5.
He transferred, I believe.
Yeah. Eric Gray caught 33 passes for them. He was 5th on the team last year in receiving yards. So
at least they get Austin Stogner back, I guess. So there you go.
I guess. Yeah, because that worked out so great at South Carolina. So, yes, they had some losses, and I don't know that they replaced them enough to where all of a sudden I'm taking a 6-7 team and jumping them in number 11. And you're going to have them ahead of Florida State. I have a hard time with Tennessee at 12. I understand that one. I don't agree with it, but I understand it, especially since you have their win total at 8.2, and you have to go down all the way to 16 to get to the next team with lower than 8.7 win rate. So they're basically saying an 8-4 team in the SEC is better than a 9-3 team in the Pac-12 or ACC. It's basically what they're saying at that point in time. Yeah. But Florida State should be high. I actually think Florida State, to me, should be a preseason top 10 team, in my opinion.
I think so. With all the production they have coming back, absolutely.
And they got some really important transfers. I mean, look, if Notre Dame would have got Braden Fisk, we'd be jumping for joy about what this defensive line is going to be like next year because of what else also broke out this year. Go ahead, Ryan.
I also love that Florida State got Jeremiah Byers from UTEP. That dude is a dominant offensive lineman. He's going to be really good for Florida State.
And getting Jared Verse to stay. Johnny Wilson comes back. Trey Benson comes back. Jordan Travis comes back. They have a lot of talent. And their recruiting class was solid. I mean, they had a really good transfer class, Ryan, to your point. They had a really good transfer class. Yeah. And they've shown so far they've been able to pick transfers that fit into the culture of the program well.
Because Trey Benson, Johnny Wilson, and Jared Verse are all transfers, to your point. Yep.
And transfers that bought into the culture that he's trying to build. If Jared Verse was just there to do his thing and go pro, he'd be going pro.
He'd be gone,
Right? I mean, the fact that he came back when everybody thought he was going to go out says a lot about the fact that he brought in a guy that bought into the culture of what – and that was the biggest thing that Mike Norvell had to fix. Florida State didn't lack talent. They don't have the talent they used to have, but it's not like they have bum players. They had a culture problem.
Yep.
So he had to get rid of a lot of bad culture players and then replace them with transfers, but you had to be really smart about the type of transfers they brought in. And I think Dylan Gibbons was a great transfer portal guy because you needed offensive line help. He's a tough kid. He brought toughness, but he also brought character.
Yeah.
Accountability. Hey, there's a right and a wrong way to do things off the field. Leadership. And then, of course, Jordan Travis's leadership tools. And then there's just a lot of different things where he's built the culture. I have a lot more faith in Florida State going into the season than I do Tennessee at 12. I understand Tennessee being at 12. I just wouldn't have them there, in my opinion.
Sure.
I'm comfortable with Oregon at 13, Rye. I'm comfortable with – I mean, I think you could even make a case maybe a couple spots higher, but I'm comfortable with them at 13. I think there's teams ahead of them they should be ahead of, but I maybe think there's a couple teams behind them that should be a little bit higher. I think Washington should be the number 2 team in the Pac-12 coming into the preseason, in my opinion.
I would actually like Utah to get bumped up a couple spots, man. I don't think – look, they lost Clark Phillips, but like other than that, I mean –
I think the Cameron Rising injury is probably scaring some people off because he tore his ACL in the bowl game.
Okay.
That would be my reservation with Utah is –
so he might be back though by season,
maybe,
right? I mean,
but
possible.
To me, it's a 6 to 8 month thing now. He got hurt in January. He should be good by the season. But what we saw in the bowl game was when he went out, and I'm not a big Cameron Rising guy, but you kind of see what he meant to that team. And but I mean, to your point, they have a lot coming back. If I felt a little better about their quarterback situation, right, I'd be okay saying, hey, they need to be top 10. Honestly, because of the way that they played last year, in my view. But I'm going with them at 15 for now because of that. Ole Miss at 16 is too high, in my opinion. Ole Miss does not belong there. My view.
They're a wild card team for me, man. Like there's parts of their team I really do like, but they haven't put it together yet. You know, it's like running back's really good. They have a couple interesting options at quarterback, but they have all been sporadic at times in their career. And I mean, defensively, man, they got a couple dudes up front. I like the Cedric Johnson kid. I like Jared Ivey at the defensive end spots.
Like that's every year, though.
Yeah,
right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They haven't put it together as a team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm not a Spencer Sanders believer. I mean, I started to jump on the bandwagon, then he did what he did.
He looked so good like the first 4 games of the year last year, and then he
he built on the Notre Dame game. Nope.
He got hurt, and then it was over with.
TCU at 17, I'm okay with. I mean, they lost a ton, but look, they made it to the championship game last year. That's quite a fall, but it's an understandable one. They had a miracle season. I don't think that's repeatable for them. I just think everything kind of went right. Florida at 18, Texas A&M at 19, and Wisconsin at 20 for me are all just really bad ones. Yeah. Really bad ones, especially since their projections for Florida. Well, did you see their projection for Florida? They have Florida at 7-5.
Yeah.
And Texas A&M at 8-5, basically 7.5 and 4.5. Washington at 8-4 at number 21 was one of the more egregious teams down below. Washington at 21 with everything they've got coming back. I mean, good Lord. And they did very well in the transfer portal too, Ryan.
Yeah.
Very well in the portal. Washington, to me, should be closer to 10, in my view.
Oh,
if not in the top 10.
The Oregon State disrespect there too, man. Wow. Under Texas Tech and Baylor after last year? That's
Washington one, though, for me, is one of the worst rankings on here.
Yeah.
Texas Tech is a little too high for me, but I actually like what Joey McGuire's doing there. They're not that soft, and I mean they're trying to establish a little bit more toughness there. I feel they're still not a very good team, but I think they're too high. But I did want to say that I do like what Joey McGuire is doing there. But yes, you're correct. The Oregon State at 24 is too low. I think Kansas State at 27 is probably a little too low.
Yeah,
a couple other teams, Ryan, that I think NC State's going to be a top 25 team this year. They have them down at 36, and I think they're going to be a top 10 team. And here's a team that I understand why they're this low, but I think they're going to be a lot better than this. That's Iowa at 37. Now, look, I get why they're there, but as bad as they were last year, Ryan, they had one of the worst offenses I have ever seen. And I am a Notre Dame fan who had to live through the 2007 season. So I know what all-time bad offense looks like.
Yeah.
And Iowa had an all-time bad offense last year. They still went 8-5 and won 5 of their last 6 games.
Do you know Spencer Petras is back on the roster, by the way? I didn't know that. I saw that the other day.
I mean, he's got to look in the mirror like, yeah, dude, I suck. I get it. I totally understand. Yes.
Grad assistant route?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, he was awful. And I have zero faith in Brian Ferentz, but it's their defensive situation is phenomenal. They never get talked about this way. They're one of the 5 best defensive football teams in America on a relatively consistent basis in regard to this, maximizing the talent they have, great coaching, great execution, all of that. Now, they may not always have an actual top 5 defense in results because they don't have the talent. But that is one of the best coached defenses in all football, and they play great defense more often than not. I mean, last year, as bad as their offense was, they still only give up 13 points a game. Give up 19 the year before that. Iowa has not given up 20 points a game since, I'm still going, 2015. And that year they gave up 20.4.
It's Phil Parker, baby.
Yeah.
Phil Parker,
man. I mean, they're an outstanding defense, and you give them a competent quarterback, and that's all Cade McNamara is. He's competent. That's it. But competent is a ginormous leap from what they had the last 2 years of quarterback.
What would you? How would so you phrase Cade McNamara as competent? How would you phrase Spencer Petras? What's the word? What's the adjective you would use for Spencer Petras?
I'm not allowed to say. I don't want to get demonetized.
Not to slander him too much.
I mean, it's just like, look, the kid is just not a Division I quarterback, right? He's got
at least not a high level FBS Power 5 quarterback.
No, right. I mean, he's not a Division I. Honestly, I say this all the time. Like, hey, he could not have started for me at Duquesne.
Wow.
No, Neil Lope is a better quarterback than him. And he just is.
Wow.
I mean, or was, I should say. There's, I would say, the Wittenberg team that I coached on at the Division III level, he wouldn't have started for us. Can't complete a pass, Ryan. Right? I mean, like, he can't complete a pass. He can't complete a hitch route.
Wow.
Like, it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. I mean, the guy can't throw. Now, part of it may be mental, but you're talking about a kid that just doesn't have the mind to play the game. He doesn't.
Yeah.
Cade McNamara is a solid quarterback. He's not going to win you a national championship, but he showed that, you put if you give him a good defense and a good run game, he can get you to the college football playoff. Well, guess what he's going to have at Iowa? A pretty darn good freaking defense.
I will say this. I will say this about Phil Parker, though. Phil Parker is going to really show how good he is this year if he maintains any semblance of what he did last year, because they are losing some guys this year, man.
Are.
Like, they lost some guys.
That's what I love about him, though, Ryan.
Yeah.
Because I pointed this out the other day. This is a wild stat for me. From 2019, they have had a different leader in tackles for loss each season. And in each season, that guy was over 10. So in 2019 and 2018, AJ Epinesa led him in tackles for loss back-to-back years, right?
Yep.
Then he leaves, and the next year, Davion Nixon leads him in tackles for loss. Chancey Golston is next at 8.5. Zach Van Valkenburg is at 8.5. 2021 comes out, and Van Valkenburg is their top guy. And then in 2022, Deontay Craig is their top guy, because then they lose the Van Valkenburg kid who had 15 tackles for loss. Come out the next year, Deontay Craig breaks out. And then Lucas Van Ness also has double digits.
Yes.
And that's just kind of what they do. And you say, man, how are they going to replace the middle linebacker? Who's a pretty darn good football player? But that's just kind of what they do. I mean, he won't be the NFL prospect that Jack Campbell is, because I remember you talking about Jack Campbell last summer when we were talking about, team, All-American teams and all that.
He's probably going to go second round. The Van Ness kid's going to go first round, most likely.
I mean, they were really good football players. So, but I think they're going to be a lot better than people think. I would have them in the top 25. I certainly like what they have coming back better than some of the teams ahead of them.
Their offense is
North Carolina. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
it's like here's an interesting. You have Michigan State at 31. Based on what?
Peyton Thorne, baby, coming back. Let's do it. Come back season.
Coming back. He was bad last year. I think UCLA at 41. I think UCLA will be a lot better than that. I think Dante Moore will be their quarterback by game 4, and they'll be better. They'll be better than that. But yeah, Duke all the way down to 53. Duke deserves. They have Duke not making a bowl game. They have Duke at 5-7. Duke's going to be
weird. That's weird.
That's going to be a quality football team. They have Washington down here at 5-7 as well. They have them all at 62. I think Washington State's going to be better than people think this year as well.
I think Washington State's going to be a pretty good team this year. I really do.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh man, the disrespect to the James Madison Dukes after their great first season, going 6-6 in this index. What?
Yeah.
Man?
Where'd they have them?
I don't even know what the number is that they're ranked, but they're ranked to go 6-6.
Yeah, they have them 91st.
That's weird. I know they lost their quarterback and stuff, but that's still very odd.
Yeah. Well, especially when you look at some of the games they won last year. It's not like they were winning with flukes.
No, they were blowing teams out at most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they beat Middle Tennessee by 37, Norfolk State by 56. They beat App State on the road, beat Texas State by 27, Arkansas State by 22, Old Dominion by 34, beat Georgia State by 2, and beat Coastal Carolina by 40.
Yeah.
And then they got blown out by Louisville, and then they lost by a touchdown to Georgia Southern and lost by 2 touchdowns to Marshall, who's a pretty good football team.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they should be higher than that. But
poor UMass, man. The Fighting Don Browns are not going to have a great season, apparently.
No. So, anyway, Ryan, more of the story as we kind of wrap up, I want to get to recruiting. I'm comfortable with where Notre Dame is, big picture. 9, I'm fine with that. I just don't think they should be behind Clemson. And I think they have zero business being behind Texas. Zero. I would just argue maybe you could make a case for some of the teams not in the top 10 to be ahead of Notre Dame based on what we know about teams. I think you can make a case. I think you can make a case for, like I said, Penn State, for example. to have a more of a deserved top 10 ranking. Now, I personally don't think that Notre Dame will. I think Notre Dame will be better than Penn State. And since the FPI is different than a preseason top 25 because it's meant to project, I'm actually not upset. I mean, in that scenario, I think they should be ahead of Penn State, but I have a hard time embracing the Texas in the top 5 one. And then Clemson being ahead of Notre Dame. I have a hard time with that one because Notre Dame's been better than Clemson the last 2 years, in my opinion. So we'll see how it plays out. But that's the ESPN FPI. Let's move over to wide receiver recruiting, Ryan.
Let's do it.
It's been a pretty wild couple weeks. And receiver recruiting, Ryan, has really been an interesting affair.
Yep.
Who I thought was going to be in the class 2 months ago is not at all what's going to be in the class, what I think is going to be in the class now. Matter of fact, the only guy that I thought was going to be in the class 2 months ago that I think is going to now be in the class, it's Cam Williams, who's already in the class.
Yes, been in the class for a minute. Yeah.
We're talking about some different guys that we thought Notre Dame liked that they've passed on and those type of things. And I look at it and say, it's completely done a 180. But in the last 2 weeks, Notre Dame's receiver recruiting, Ryan, has taken a completely different shift. And I have to say, it's going to look a lot different. I want to give you a chance to speak on it. And then I want to kind of also speak on the fact that it's actually kind of impressive to watch how it shifted because they were willing to back off guys that they liked and had a good shot with because they found other guys that they liked even better.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to be as a coaching staff, in my view.
I think the last week and a half, Brian, last 10 days, I would quantify it as clarity. There's been a lot of clarity to the 2024 receiving class for Notre Dame. Like we knew Cam Williams is, he's rated as a 5-star on the 247 composite ranking, right? Like he's one of those guys, and we know how good Cam could be as a football player, and he's been the certainty in the class. But to your point, over the last few months, we've been talking about guys like Ryan Wingo, like Jeremiah McClellan. There's been a lot of different names out there in the universe. But over the last week and a half, we've had 3 guys on campus specifically that I think are very important guys for Notre Dame in this class. 2 for sure. No doubt about it, right?
I think all 3 are important. It's just about what are the numbers going to look like, and could you 100%. Take all 3 of them? But yes, continue.
So it started with last week. We had, of course, Jason Robinson, who was out of Long Beach Poly. Yep, out in California, who is a 5'9", 160 pounds, really dynamic space player, really good route runner. He's a former USC commit who was on campus last Monday at Notre Dame and ended up spending 3 days at Notre Dame. And that was kind of an unexpected 3 days. He was really planning, Tyler was planning on maybe a day, and then you get back on Tuesday. But they stayed until Wednesday, man. And I mean, quite simply, Notre Dame has just completely flipped the script on that recruitment. And even while he was committed to USC, person that he kept talking about, Brian, consistently was Chancey, man. Chancey has really excited not only Jason Robinson, but also his parents and his family, his younger brothers. There is a legitimate buzz in their family for Coach Stuckey, for a little bit of his background, but more than anything, the authenticity that he brings to the table, man. How consistent, persistent he has been as a recruiter has been great for Jason. It really has. So Notre Dame has put themselves in a great position with Jason Robinson, who intends on taking an official visit to Notre Dame in the future as well.
And that's the interesting part of this, because as of right now, Ryan, Notre Dame plans to only take 3 receivers.
Yes.
They're open to potentially taking a 4th. And I think with Lorenzo Styles jumping in the portal, there's a chance that they could justify getting up to 4.
Becomes more likely.
Especially if you decide, hey, we're not going to take a second tight end. There's different aspects to this. The reason that it gets interesting is because there's some other positions Notre Dame would like to load up on in numbers this year. Defensive line, safety. I think they'd really like a number 2 back in this, or not a number 2 back, a second back. It doesn't mean that he has to be number 2.
Right.
I think that there's a chance they go up to 4 offensive linemen. I just feel like when you look at their board, they don't necessarily need to get a third corner, but they really want Caleb Beasley. I wonder if they look at how good their freshman receiver class is and say, we've got Tobias, who still has 2 years left minimum, before he's even draft eligible. And then you've got the 4 freshmen, 3 of which have already on been campus and look great. You've already got Cam Williams. Do you want to take 4 in this class if that means you can't take a 6th defensive lineman or a 4th third safety or a 3rd corner, 2nd running back? And I think that's the rub, that Notre Dame is in. They have 4 guys that they really like at receiver, but they have 5 guys that they really like at receiver, but they might only be able to take 2 of them. And so that's the thing, is the guys that are wanting to drag this thing on, okay, I get that, but just know that you may not have a spot left. Yep. And it's actually a really unique problem to have, and kind of a good problem to have, is which really good player do we not have room for, if that's what it comes down to. Or, hey, we have to take a 4th guy because the guys on the board are too good. And that's when you bring up Jason Robinson, that's the interesting rub, because you and I both know this, Ryan. It's easy to say, well, just take 4. Right. But it's you got to look at the makeup of your roster, because if you take 4, when you go into the 2024 season, there's a chance you have Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, Chris Tyree, Tobias Merriweather, the 8 freshmen. If you take 4, there's a chance you're going to have 12 wide receivers on your roster. That's at least 1 too many, numbers-wise. That's got to come from – this is what people don't understand. Okay, cool. Yeah, it takes one. Okay, fine. Where are you taking that from? Right. Because you only have 85. What position are you stealing that from? Right? You have to be able to – not you, Ryan, but like when we're having this conversation, you have to be able to answer that question. I know. And that's the tough spot as Notre Dame is. Now, I think the offensive staff is trying to bang for a 4th, but the head coach and the recruiting coordinator, they have to kind of make those are the ones that have to make those tough decisions. And it's going to be a tough one. It really is. I hope they can get to 4, though. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. I hope they're able to get to 4.
I hope so, too.
Got to make it work.
I mean, because this weekend, obviously, there was 2 other very important wide receivers on campus, and Micah Gilbert out of Charlotte Christian in North Carolina, and then, of course, Isaiah Canyon out of Warner Robins in Georgia. And, by the intel that we've been able to gain, and again, you guys would have known this Sunday morning if you were on boards.irishbreakdown.com, as far as the intel we were hearing from the recruiting visits. Things have gone incredibly well with both Micah Gilbert and Isaiah Canyon. We know that Micah Gilbert has already set up a college decision for the 2nd of next month at 4:00 Eastern time. We expect Notre Dame to be a –
yes. Can I just – because the way you said that, Ryan, is 100% accurate.
Yep.
But to be more clear, it's next Tuesday, right?
Yes.
Like you say the 2nd of next month, I think, it's a ways down. It's 6 days from now.
Is today the 27th? Is today the 26th?
Today's the 26th. So Sunday's the 30th, Monday's May 1st, and then Tuesday's May 2nd. So you are correct. It is the 2nd. It's the first Tuesday of next month, but that's in 6 days, right? And that's one, Ryan. Let's talk about that one for a second.
Yeah.
You and I have known they've liked Micah Gilbert for a while, but this thing, it's kind of like that scene from Anchorman, right? Like, that escalated in a hurry. You know what I mean?
Quickly.
Like that got out of hand fast. That jumped up a notch, right? Like you're coming in. First of all, they weren't sure they were even going to get him on campus for a visit there for a little bit. Like, would he be able to make it? He had some other trips planned. You finally get him in for the blue gold game, and it didn't take long, Ryan, for Notre Dame to really, which is why Notre Dame wanted to get him on campus so bad.
Some kids, man, you get them on campus and it just escalates that quickly because it's a different vibe. And I know that some people that aren't Notre Dame fans out there or haven't been to South Bend will just like roll their eyes on that. Like, oh yeah, it's so different. Like, it is, man. I don't know what to tell you about it. Like, there's just a different vibe when you get on campus in Notre Dame. So Micah Gilbert, obviously, they're in a very good position with going into his decision date on the 2nd on Tuesday. Isaiah Canyon's another kid out of Warner Robins who is a 6'3", 198-pound receiver, was verified 4.51 in the 40 at a camp a few weeks ago. Yes, laser time, official time.
Which means hand timed. He's in the 4.4s. Is what
Yes.
that
Oh,
means.
easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends. If you have a fast finger, maybe he's in the high 4.3s. You never know. I mean, there's some people that have those fast fingers, man. But to your point, man,
That's not
very
someone
good
whose
athlete.
fast fingers I want giving times from.
Exactly. High upside kid, though. He's a player that is asked to play quarterback, wide receiver, corner, everywhere for Warner Robins. He's even the team's punter. Really excited to see what he looks like when he's able to mature as just a wide receiver at the next level. That's going to be very interesting. We expect Notre Dame to be, we know Notre Dame is in a very good position there. We'll see as far as when he decides to make a decision, but we expect it to not drag on too long, right? Like that's kind of where we are with that. So the conversation piece to your point, Brian, is you have Micah Gilberts, Isaiah Canyon, and Jason Robbins, who I all think that you're in very good position for. There's technically right now for 2 spots that we know of, right? It could get pushed for a third. I would love Notre Dame to be able to take all 3 of those players because the reason that I really want it is because there's going to be natural attrition on a roster. You know, you talk about all the guys that could be back. We know that it doesn't typically always just work out like that. But in theory, I get the numbers for what it is right now. But also, all 4 of those receivers, if that was your end conversation of Cam Williams, Micah Gilberts, Isaiah Canyon, and Jason Robinson, they're all so different, which makes me really excited about a possibility of having that in a class. I mean, you have Cam, who's kind of that field outside receiver, who's got vertical ability. He's twitchy. You got Isaiah Canyon, who's more of that boundary, explosive, fast downfield weapon, right? Then you have Micah Gilbert, who could also play boundary, but he's a different type of boundary. He's more of your back shoulder, big boy type of slot boundary receiver who could also play in the slot because he's got good route running chops. And then you got Jason Robbins, who is at 5'9", 160, could fit into probably either field spots, run routes, work in space, and just be different, man. That would be a great blend of skill sets.
The issue here, Ryan, that people seem to have is people think that this is like – I don't think people understand what it takes putting a roster together. There's too many people. Just take a guy in case someone changed their mind. But what if somebody doesn't change their mind? Right? Like this year they got under it. What you don't understand is like somebody in the chat love this guy, but he's like he wants him to take a second running back. He wants him to take a second tight end. He wants him to take a 4th offensive lineman. He wants him to take 4 receivers. He wants him to take 6 defensive linemen. He wants him to take 4 safety. It's like, bro, you can't have 105 dudes on scholarship. Right? Because now it's like you got to get 20. You can't do that, right? And the other part too is you don't want to do things that set yourself up for mass departures. Yeah. Bring in 8 receivers in a 2-year class. You look at it with no context. You're thinking, boy, that looks phenomenal, right? But my whole thing is this is about building a roster, and 12 receivers is too much, in my opinion. Now you could say yes, but in 2024. Tyree's going to be a 5th-year guy. There's no guarantee he comes back. Fair.
Right. Yeah.
What if Deion can't? So then you're also looking at it, but after 2024, and this is the counter argument to what I'm saying, after 24, Deion's gone. Jaden Thomas is probably gone. Chris Tyree's definitely gone. And who knows if Tobias breaks out the next couple of years, he could be gone. And now all of a sudden you're looking at it to where now you're down to like 7. Fair. But then you go out and you fill up in 25 because when you look at the 25 board as well, Ryan, the 25 board has got some pretty darn good receivers on it already as well.
For sure.
You know, I mean, you look at obviously Dalen McCutcheon visited recently.
Taz Williams was just on campus this weekend.
Quincy Porter is very high on Notre Dame. And then, of course, Taylor Taylor, to me, grades out higher as a sophomore than any of the guys that Notre Dame is looking at graded out as sophomores. Now, Cam Williams as a junior was phenomenal, but as a sophomore, he was outstanding. And so the whole thing is you have to understand this is about building a roster that's going to work, that doesn't force a bunch of guys out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would love to have all 4 of those guys, including Cam Williams. And I want Notre Dame to make it work, but you have to find a way to make it work. Now, if Notre Dame pushes for a 4th, that tells me that they're looking at their current receiver roster and they don't think everyone's going to be back in 2024.
Yeah.
That's where they'd have to make that decision. Hey, look, between this guy, and this guy, I'm pretty confident one of them is going to leave. Right? then okay. So my whole thing is I'm not against taking all three. I'd like to take all three, right? You know I'd like to take all three.
Yeah.
I'm simply saying it's not as simple as if they don't take all three, bash them. It's not that simple, right? And especially because my whole thing is you can't turn down Canyon or Gilbert to wait on Jason Robinson. You can't. I like Jason Robinson a lot, and I know you like him a lot.
I do.
But those are also really good football players, Canyon and Gilbert. And the funny thing is people say, well, Canyon's the guy you pass on. He's got the highest ceiling of all the guys we're talking about, in my opinion. And here's the other thing about Isaiah Canyon that's a little asterisk for me. If that dude decided next year he wanted to play defense, I'd take him at Notre Dame.
He's a pretty good corner, man.
And I'd move him to safety.
Yeah.
And he'd probably be one of my tops. So, again, that's the other reason I'm not passing on him. He's the one for sure I wouldn't pass on.
To that degree, though, Brian, the fact that could be a possibility, though, would that also figure into maybe taking 4?
It would for me. But, again, this is my – like I'm with you all wanting to take all 3. I'm with you. But the response that I don't like is if they don't take all 3, I'm going to be pissed. Well, okay, but explain to me how it's going to work, though.
Yeah.
Right? I gave you my reasoning for why it might work. I think there's 2 reasons for it. But this is the difficult situation that Notre Dame finds themselves in. And all I'm trying to get people to do is not to say, agree with me. Yeah. I just want people to start thinking more about what roster building looks like.
Yeah.
And do you really want Notre Dame to get into the business of telling 10 kids every year you have to leave? Right. I don't. I really don't. Because Notre Dame was able to get away with things this year that they can't next year because of the way the rules are. Because this offseason was technically part of Marcus Freeman's first year, they could put kids on academic scholarships and no longer – they can't do that next year. To get those kids off scholarship, you got to force them off the team and out of school. That's not – Notre Dame promises 4-year scholarships. If a kid chooses not to leave, he's not going to leave. And there have been kids that Notre Dame has told, hey, you're not going to play. Just being honest with you, you're not going to play. We just want to let you know that. And the kid said, I understand. Are you going to go in the portal? No. Why? Because I came here to get a Notre Dame degree. That's the thing. And you're going to tell me that you're going to support Marcus Freeman and his staff telling all those kids, I'm sorry, I don't care. Leave. No, I can't. And I don't think that's who Marcus Freeman is either. I mean, he'll tell the kid straight up, hey, you're just so you know, you're not going to play. I'm going to be honest with you, you're not going to play. And they should do that. But it's not as simple as just forcing a bunch of kids out. They can't do that. Yeah. And that's if all of a sudden Notre Dame starts doing that, then you lose sort of one of your greatest selling points, which is your degree. Well, hey, I'm not even promised to get that degree because you may decide in 3 years you don't want me and I can't get my degree anyway. That's not where Notre Dame wants to be. You can't, in order to get a 4th receiver or a 3rd corner, you can't take steps that now undercuts your greatest asset on the recruiting trail.
Sure.
Like that's the other part of this, Ryan. And so we got to be able to look at this and say, it's not as simple as that. Back to the receiver conversation.
Yep.
The thing about this whole thing, though, is holy moly, what a difference a couple years makes.
Seriously. Yeah.
That we're in a situation where we're talking about which of these 3 guys that you and I like a ton are we as a staff, if we're Notre Dame, going to maybe not take. Now, I will say this, talking to my sources, they would like to try to find the offensive staff wants to make it work, but it's not always up to them. That's what y'all have to understand. This isn't Jared Parker saying, nah, I don't like that guy. Or Chancey Stuckey saying, nah, I don't like that guy. This is more of the head coach saying, I told you guys you had X number of scholarships this year. So if you want to take this kid, then tell me where you're cutting. That's what a head coach has to do. I told you you're getting 12 this year. I'm just throwing that number out there. Told you you're not getting more than 12. So if you're going to take a 4th receiver, that's fine. You can take 7 receivers for all I care, but you're only getting 12. And that's how it works. And so, or 10, whatever. You get the point that I'm making. And then they got to figure out how to make it work. What's more important, a 4th receiver a year after getting 4 last year, or a 2nd offensive tackle, or a 2nd running back? And that's where you've got to think about this.
I'm like thinking about like the vantage point or the perspective of maybe taking 2 safeties and treating Isaiah Canyon as a athlete. You know what I mean? Sure. Like a wide receiver that could play safety. Like that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Okay. You know? Yeah.
I'm with you on that, but let's play. This is what we'd have to do if we're in a room having this conversation. Okay,
Sure.
I like that. But what if he's your best receiver of the three? Now you're in a situation where you've got 2 safeties in the 23 class, 2 safeties in the 24 class, and only 1 returning safety on your roster that next year, and he's a 5th-year senior.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
we're just talking about for 2024 circumstance. Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're coming into that season, and I'm saying going into 2025.
2025.
So, like right now, Notre Dame has 5 scholarship safeties, correct? Well, 6 if you want to count Thomas Harper.
Sure.
2 of them are flat out gone after this year. No question gone.
Yeah.
2 of the others are seniors that will be gone next year, after next year. Could be gone after this year, depending on how they play. And then now you're left with Ben Minich, Adon Schuler, and 2 guys from this class. Good football players, most likely, depending on who they get. But now you're in I hope this guy doesn't get hurt. Hope that guy doesn't get hurt, because now you're in a situation where, and by that point in time, there is no Clarence Lewis or Ryan Barnes most likely to move to safety.
Sure.
So it makes sense, but now you're almost forced to move Isaiah Canyon. But what if he's balling out a receiver? What if him and Cam Williams are the 2 best receivers in the class? So
it's such a fun conversation. Yeah,
it's tricky.
It is, because then we could also, there is the transfer portal sort of the conversation too, right? We're like, okay, I need another safety. I'll go get another safety. Like because you just used Thomas Harper part of the conversation, right? Like he is a guy that they got from transfer portal. They got Brandon Joseph last year. So yeah, it's a nuanced conversation. Honestly, I would have a lot of fun with that conversation. If I'm in a room with a bunch of coaches, because then you're like pounding the table and being like, I get it, but can't pass on that kid, man. Just can't pass on him. I get it though. I get it. We'll figure it out.
I think what I would do is I would say, if I'm an offensive coach, I'd say this: look, we have to have this number 2 tight end conversation. That's over. It's done. It's decided. We're not taking a second tight end. Barring someone leaving the program, we're not taking a second tight end in this class. Right? We're not taking a second quarterback in this class either. And if we get, this is us looking at from a coaching standpoint. If we get Styles Prescott, it's Gearby Lambert or bust, and that's it. I'm okay taking 3 offensive linemen in this class if you get Styles Prescott, unless you're able to get Gearby Lambert. I'm not taking Grant Bricks. I'm not taking Kevin Haywood. I'm not taking, unless some kid comes along, the next Joe Walt comes along that we don't know about yet. And so I'm going there. We have to get a second running back. After that, now we can justify doing that. And then we'll figure the Gearby Lambert one out later if he wants to come, kind of thing. I think that would be the argument that I would make if I was the offensive staff. And then the other one is here, but here's the other rub. Do you maybe want to consider leaving that 4th spot open? As much as you may love a Jason Robinson or one of these other guys, that maybe down the road, if you have the season that we're talking about, you might be able to get more interest from a Ryan Wingo down the road.
Right.
A guy like that. Because if you take all 3 of them now, you are literally completely done. I mean, if you have a monster season, you can't now then go out and, if some stud player wants to look at you again. For me personally, I think building a roster-wise, it makes sense to go 4 last year, 3 this year, 3 next year, with 2 tight ends next year as well. 2 backs this year, 2 tight ends next year. That's the kind of the route that I would go for me.
Yeah.
And if I can figure out a way to get 4 based on my current roster, because look, guys, the portal's open for 3 more days.
It is.
There may be some things happen the next couple of days. You're like, yep, we can take 4 now.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
But I do think, back to kind of receiver, Ryan, I do think it speaks volumes about how much this has changed in the last couple of years, to where now you're in a predicament where you may have to turn some good players away, maybe. And again, we're not saying that they're going to turn anybody away. We're not saying that. I am saying, however, the plan all along has been for 3. But because of what they've done, they could be in a situation where you're going to have to turn. Because here's what they're doing: they're going to have to drop Josiah Brown.
Yes.
They're going to have to drop Bredell Richardson, 2 guys we know they like a lot. Because we're not even talking about those guys. They've already dropped Quasi Gilmer.
Jeremiah McClellan.
They've already dropped TJ Moore. They've dropped TJ McClellan or Jeremiah McClellan. They've dropped Daniel Freitag. They've dropped a lot of guys because they focused on a smaller list of dudes.
Yep.
And so what you all have to understand is there's no way this staff would dream of saying no to Isaiah Canyon. None. Of the three that we're talking about, Ryan, that is the lowest chance they say no to.
You know what's funny, Brian, is Isaiah Canyon's that guy right now for people where they just like look at the recruiting ranking and stuff and they're just like, nope, don't want him. But he's the guy kind of kid also that will rise as a senior and be like a top 100 kid, and then they'll be like, oh, we can't lose him. Like close to signing.
And here's the problem: one network already has him in the top 100.
Do they really?
But it's the most unreliable one out there. It's On 3.
On 3,
yeah. So it's like you can't be like, oh, On 3, because then it's like, yeah, but they also have CJ Carr 100 spots lower than him, right? That's just the stupid part about it, right?
Yeah.
But his rankings are ESPN jumps him up to 240 in their most recent rankings. Rival still hasn't found the time. Apparently, it's still not important enough for them to even give him a grade. Period. He's a 5.6 3-star. So that's what they throw on a kid that they just, okay, he's getting offers. Let's just make a profile for him, is basically what that is. But he is an absolute dude. So let's kind of talk about these three guys. You mentioned Micah Gilbert, Ryan. He's going to make his decision on May 2nd.
Yes.
The thing I like about him is Notre Dame, the way that they play offense. I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and I want you to speak to your agreement or not, because this is not something that you and I have necessarily specifically talked about.
Okay.
I believe you have to get a guy like Micah Gilbert every single year. Because when you're a team like Notre Dame, where you're a pro-style team that is going to run a lot of one-on-ones into the boundary and a lot of RPOs, the big, physical, phenomenal hands, strong, volume pass catcher, you need one of every year. I think
Greathouse-esque. Yeah.
Yes. Right. I think Greathouse was that guy last year. And I think you could argue that Rico, in a different body type, brings some of the volume aspects as well, just more of a field volume guy. Yeah. I'm more looking at the bigger, the guy that can play the boundary or the field or the slot, those two spots. Greathouse was that guy last year. Yeah. Micah Gilbert is that guy this year. Because, see, I could see Cam Williams not being a volume guy. Cam could do that, too. Cam could do whatever the heck he wants. But I could see Cam being that X guy that averages like 19 yards a catch.
50 catches for 1,000 yards.
Right. So if we're comparing him to the Clemson group, right? Like Cam is more Justin Ross in this scenario than he would be T. Higgins or a Mike Williams, who are more volume guys in that group. Right. That's where I'm coming from. And, to me, that makes him and this, Ryan, I've been incredibly high on him for a while. And it's not just the talent, but I think the thing on him is I think people focus too much on the speed or lack of. He's not slow, but he's not fast either. Yeah. He's probably a 4.6 guy? Do you think that's fair?
He's fine.
Like 4.6 guy.
Yeah.
But he's got great feet. And he's strong, and he is one of the 2 or 3 best pure pass catchers, like catchers of the football. So I don't say pass catcher because that can be a phrase used for wide receiver. So I'm going to be specific. He's one of the 3 or 4 best, I'll say this, 3 or 4 best pure pass catchers of the football in this class, meaning hand strength combined with concentration, focus, catch radius, all that. His hands are absolute glue, in my opinion. And he then fits that volume guy to a T, which is why I've always felt that Micah Gilbert or a guy like him is an absolute must in this class. And as much as I love the other guys, I don't know if anyone brings that specific, unique trait to the same degree that he does. Isaiah Canyon maybe could be that guy. But I could also see Isaiah being an X, being a Z, being more of a downfield vertical guy as opposed to a guy that catches 80 passes, in my opinion. Like I could see, let's just say down the road, your 2 best receivers are Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams. Yeah. I could see them both being like 1,000-yard guys, but Cam does it on 60 catches and Micah does it on 80.
Right.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah,
Is that right? So that's why, to me, even though we don't talk a lot about him, and this rise has happened so quickly, that's why, to me, Micah Gilbert's a very important player for Notre Dame to potentially land in this class.
Yeah. I think because I agree with that. I think that my one thing, though, is that if you ask me what Notre Dame needs more of on this roster, Brian, I would also say Jason Robinson's probably what they need more of, right? Like they just don't have that type enough, in my opinion. Like you just had to convert Chris Tyree to that position because you don't have enough of that on your roster, right? I mean, you have Caleb Smith that's coming in 2023, obviously, but you still need more of those guys that are like that route runner, space type that can play both field spots potentially, but are guys that could also play in the slots and could do that. So like that's kind of where I guess that's where I get stuck on if the numbers don't work out and you have to pass, unfortunately, on Jason Robinson, because I'm just like that type's so important, right? Like because I just don't think there's enough of him.
Here's the disagreement that you and I have. I don't disagree at all with what you just said about the need. You know, I've been making this case for a long time. You need that skill set. And that's why I would advocate, if I was a receivers coach, that's exactly what you just said is exactly what I'd pound on the table for number 4. Here's my only concern. I don't necessarily view him as a natural slot. He's got a slot body. He doesn't have a slot game. That's my only concern. Right? Now, for the point that you're making, but that's actually something I love about him, because the guy that I've compared him to is Jahan Dotson, who was an outside receiver. And that's what I mean, Jason Robinson, in my opinion, is one of the 5 best route runners in this class, like nationally.
Yeah.
Like he's got great hands as well, especially when you consider how small he is. Like he's like 145 pounds, and that's it. I just don't necessarily view him as a guy to me, I don't view him the way that I view Caleb Smith, for example. I think their bodies are somewhat similar, but I really view Jason Robinson as having more of an outside game. That's my only pushback to your point, Ryan, about Jason specifically. But even then, as an outside guy, I think you could still make the case that you made. I just would make it more of an outside guy. He's more of the shifty, because I actually think he's more of a Rico Flores than he is a Caleb Smith. But I would argue they also need more of that on the roster.
They do.
Because a lot of the other guys are the tall. Cam Williams is a tall, vertical guy. Braylon's that. Micah Gilbert's the big physical boundary guy. I think that Isaiah Canyon's the big, tall, fast vertical guy. He's more Braylon James and Cam Williams than he is Rico Flores. So I would make the same case. I would just make it a little bit different. The other thing too is a guy that's 145 pounds working a slot where he's going to be getting jammed around a lot. That makes
he's 160. He's 160.
Yeah, no.
Give him a little bit more. Give him a little bit more.
So he maybe put on 15 pounds since he was at Notre Dame a couple weeks ago.
Come on, man. So, come on. Give him something.
But no, he's literally, I think, he weighed in the 140s during this visit. But I can live with that because he's going to put on weight.
Yep.
And we've seen guys that, what was Tutu Atwell's weight at the combine? Wasn't he like 148? Combine?
It was like 156, but yeah, still.
That was after 4 years of college. So that would be my own.
Dylan Edwards is also 155, and they had a commitment from him, obviously.
But he's a different type of player than Jason Robinson. Dylan's more of the argument that you made. A guy like Dylan Edwards fits into the argument that you made. I think Jason's more of a natural wide receiver than a shifty slot guy. That's my only pushback on that. But end of the day, I'd still want 4, and I'd still for me, I played a devil's advocate argument earlier. Do you want to take 4 and then maybe miss out on a chance down the road? My answer to that would be, actually, yeah, I would. Because if you get Jason Robinson this summer and Isaiah Canyon soon and Micah Gilbert soon, do you know what those 3 guys have in common, Ryan? They didn't need to be convinced to come here by what you see in the fall. They already bought in. If you need to see Sam Hartman go for 4,000 yards before you're willing to buy in, are you really as bought in? Give me those guys that understood what we're trying to do, because it's not like we're talking about them being top 250 guys.
Sure.
I personally grade the lowest I grade any of those guys is 150, the 150 range. They're all top 100 caliber players and like borderline top. And Jason Robinson, I made this case. If Jason Robinson was an inch or two taller, about 15, 20 pounds heavier, he's an easy top 100 player.
Yeah.
He's one of the most polished, like pure, just take out all the measurables. He's one of the 10 best receivers in this class, in my opinion. And he's a better natural receiver than anybody that we're talking about on this board, not named Cam Williams. But the size is there, right?
Sure.
But for me, I would personally take all four, including Cam Williams, because they want to be here if that's the choice that they made. And if Ryan Wingo needs to be convinced by the season, that's okay. You made that choice. I feel pretty good about the four we're putting together. I do. And I think they all fit the pro-style nature that Notre Dame wants to be, but they also bring some different RPO aspects to it. And I think that's the thing for me is I don't know that the only issue I have is I don't know that they have a guy that's necessarily an after-the-catch guy in the new group. I think the best after-the-catch guy would still be Cam Williams, not Jason Robinson. So that's just looking at their games on film, that would be my stance. But I'll say this, if you're able to get that four, Ryan, or even just three of those four, it's one heck of a receiver class right after last year's receiver class. And all of a sudden, Notre Dame's stacking receivers up as good as anybody, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the early returns from the 2023 class, people can call Isaiah Canyon a gamble if you want, right? Like a high upside, low floor type of dude, which is fair. But after you just got Rico, Jaden Greathouse, and Braylon with what you've seen in the spring, you can take some of those guys, man, because you got some guys that can play. So you're in a good spot, man.
Yeah. So right now, Ryan, Robinson visited, I think it's Notre 17th. Dame, Colorado, and Cal.
Yep.
You've said that Colorado you think is the toughest competition right now, or do you think Cal is?
Man, I don't even know. I think Notre Dame's pretty clear leader right now. So that's kind of where we are with it. Yeah.
Isaiah Canyon, he's going to make a decision, I think, very soon.
Yep.
And then obviously Micah Gilbert's going to make his in a second. So you're going to go from just not a lot of movement at receiver potentially for months. They got Cam Williams back in June or last July, I believe.
Yep.
And now you're sitting here talking about you could potentially add 2 to 3 guys in a matter of a couple months if they're able to close on all these guys. And the other thing too is if you're able to get Canyon and Gilbert soon, now you have even more reason to let Jason play the process out, because you don't have to. You got a couple months to figure it out. You don't. The mistake that here's the one mistake Notre Dame can make, right, is telling Jason Robinson no right now. If they got the other two kids, hypothetically, I'd say no, man. You're it. You're all that's left, buddy. But take your visits. All good. You don't need to rush. We got our 3. You go figure it out, and then that gives you time to let the roster shape up over the next couple weeks and figure out where you are. Because then you'll find out, hey, look, we're not where we hoped we would be at safety. So we're going to do what Ryan said, and we're going to take Jason Robinson, knowing that there's a chance that Isaiah Canyon may be a guy that could go help us somewhere else.
Right.
Something like that.
Brandon Hillman-ish vibe to it. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Although if I'm Chancey Stuckey and Jared Parker, I'm fighting like crazy to not let the defense have him. And I don't know that they've talked to Isaiah Canyon about playing defense. So that'd be the other thing too, is you can't take a kid's commitment in thinking and by the way, this is our opinion. We're not saying that Notre Dame views him as a safety.
Yep.
I've never heard that ever from anyone. This is just us talking here. But I think the kid is a dude. Micah Gilbert, I think, is a guy you have to have. Isaiah Canyon's the interesting one for me, Ryan. I don't know. Have you and I really talked? I know you and Sean have talked about him. But have you and I talked about him publicly, about kind of thoughts on how you see him as a player? Because to me,
I feel like we have.
I see a guy that's one of the best athletes on the board. 6'3", almost 200 pounds, right? Fast. I think the only reason he's not ranked higher by some is because I don't think people know where to project him. And I think that's more of an issue for the recruiting services than it is for him, in my opinion.
Yep.
Plays at a very good high school, plays quarterback, receiver, DB, and he
Punter.
looks like a Division I player on both sides of the ball. I mean, he does. If I was an FCS team running a read option offense, I'd want him at quarterback. He's got a decent arm. I mean, again.
I mean, even if I was a Group of 5 team, I might consider it, right? Like Georgia State or something like that.
Quarterback needs to be 1,000-yard rusher. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so you don't think he can run Troy Taylor's offense the way that they did it last year with that kid that rushed for 1,000 yards? So that's kind of where I'm at, Ryan. I think Isaiah Canyon to me is an intriguing player because you just know we've talked about this. Notre Dame is trying to recruit more guys that are different.
Yep.
That are just, you look at him and you say, that guy's different. And when I look at Isaiah Canyon, I see a guy that's over 6'3". He's going to be over 200 pounds when it's all said and done. And he's a burner. Because we've talked about how explosive Braylon James is. Braylon ran a 4.47 laser timed. Yep. Isaiah ran a 4.51. Isaiah is a full inch taller than Braylon and about 15 pounds heavier than what Braylon was at the time that they ran those. And so you're a very comparable athlete to Braylon James, just in a bigger form, and a guy that can do multiple things. I think guys like him are rare. They really are. I don't understand the recruiting rankings. I don't understand why some teams are not on him more. I think it's just not seen enough of him. But this is the kind of kid Notre Dame has to start stealing from the South.
It does
seem
like
the top 50 guy. It's not the Jeremiah Smiths. You're not going to get those guys. It's this kind of guy. Go ahead. Sorry, Rye.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it does seem like everywhere that Isaiah has gone to, like Florida State, for instance, though, they offer him because then they see him in person, right? Like he's one of those guys where like you just kind of want to verify everything that you're hearing on the camp circuit type of thing. And he's getting those offers when he's going to Florida States of the world, for instance. So, yeah, man, late riser because, again, and it is a tough time projecting a little bit, right? Because you see a little bit of him at wide receiver, but it's like a lot of what he does is just him being a better athlete than everybody around him. So
I think for me, the reason that I tend to fall in love with these kind of guys is because I've spent my whole career evaluating those kind of guys. This is what we had to do at the Division III level. I had to find some kid who played receiver but didn't get the ball because his offense he played in.
Yep.
Because if the kid got the ball, he'd be getting a full ride scholarship somewhere. I had to find that quarterback that I could say, you look at his footwork, his technique, what are his hips like, all that, then I can project that to receiver. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes that teams make nowadays is they're not willing to take enough athletes at wide receiver because there's so many receivers out there that you can see a million 7-on-7 clips from and a million high school clips from a receiver that teams aren't willing to take the gamble on that. What I like about Notre Dame is that they're more willing to do that with a kid like this, with a Brandon Hillman, right? I mean, that's kind of the risk that they took on Brandon Hillman, and Isaiah Canyon has a much higher view of, or a much higher ranking now than what Brandon Hillman had at this time a year ago.
Oh, big time.
But very similar type of players, just they play all over. Another guy that was like this coming out of high school, Jalen Sneed. Another guy that was like this coming out of high school, Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah. Didn't have a position, but you're just like, this guy can play, man. This guy's a good football player. Not all of them pan out. Prince Colley was like that. He didn't pan out.
Yep.
Partly because of injury and some other things going on there. But that's my thing with I look Isaiah Canyon. I see a guy that just has. When you come across, you can't, man. As a wide receiver, I can teach you your stance. I can teach you your start. I can teach. This was always my philosophy, and it still is. I don't care if a guy can run routes or not. Does he have the footwork and the foot quickness, the agility, the balance, the ankle flexibility to be a good route runner? Does he have the hips to be a good route runner? Does he have the feel for playing the game of football? Does he have the ball skills? Does he have the catch radius? Like, give me the tools, and then I can teach you how to play wide receiver. I've always believed that. And the reason I'm more willing to take that guy now is because I feel like they actually have a receivers coach that can teach them those things. Isaiah Canyon would have scared the heck out of me under the previous regime.
Yeah.
Because I said, who's going to teach him how to play, man?
Exactly.
Who's going to teach this kid how to play? Right? Well, Chancey Stuckey will. You know what I mean? He will. and you start feeling pretty good about that. So he's the
you
guy
also
that
have you also have your offensive coordinator, Jared Parker, who has a great reputation as a wide receiver coach as well. So
yeah, played wide receiver in the SEC. That's a good point.
Yep.
It's a very good
Yep.
point. Very good
Yep.
point. So Isaiah Canyon is a very intriguing player to me, Ryan. And yeah, I won't ask you to do that, but here's my grade for them all, just so for people that don't know. I'm going to have Phil Mevals coming up on these guys. Isaiah Canyon graded out top 100 for me with 5-star upside. Micah Gilbert is 4.5 or 4.0 star top 150 player with 4.5-star upside. And Jason Robinson grades out also as a top 150 player with 4.5-star upside. The 4.5 stars for him, Ryan, comes from if he's able to physically hold up, he's going to be a dude. Yep. That's it. That's my only concern on Jason. That's it. He's the most polished receiver in the class, ahead of Cam, ahead of all of them. He is the most polished because I don't have to teach him a dang thing. Matt Balis is going to have if I'm the receivers coach in Notre Dame, it's like, dude, Matt Balis is going to have a bigger say in this kid's future than I will. Because I'm refining some stuff and I'm teaching him some things that we do. But like Jason Robinson shows up knowing how to play this game at a very high level. Very high level. And I mean, he is a big time player.
What you saw Jaden Greathouse catch 11 passes in the blue goal game. I'm not gonna say Jason Robinson would also do that, but like he'll catch some passes in the blue goal game. It's just like that's what he does, man. It's just what he does.
Exactly. and I mean, because he's in the same vein as Jaden and Rico. Because remember, you and I were having this debate this summer when we were this winter. It wasn't a debate. It was just we were kind of the superlative for the class. And the one sort of back and forth you had is, who's the better route runner, Rico or Jaden?
Yeah.
And that's how it was all spring. Jaden had the breakout spring game, but Rico had the better overall spring. Mm-hmm. And why was that? They're talented, number one. Yes. But number two, they're super polished. You don't have to teach them as much as you have to teach Braylon. Right. Braylon I think Braylon has the highest ceiling of all of them.
Sure.
If they all maximize their ability, Braylon is the best of all of them, in my opinion, because he has the most physical tools. But that's what Jason Robinson is, just in a smaller package. Like, this kid's going to show up mentally and technically ready to play right now. Yep. I walk into Matt Balis's offense and I say, I will give you $1,000 gift card to Ruth's Chris if you can get this kid up to 170.
Yeah.
By the fall. You know what I mean? That's it. I mean, because the talent is there, Ryan. It's just the size. That's the only knock I have on that kid. Like, if you put Jason Robinson's game into Isaiah Canyon, you have a 5-star player.
Oh, easy. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
because Jason also wins at the catch point pretty dang well for his size. It's weird.
And Ryan, that right there, that's why I compare him to Jahan Dotson. Yeah. Because I thought Jahan was pretty good at that for being such a small guy.
He was.
You know what I mean? Like, that's also why I view him more of an outside guy. I feel like in the slot, you take away that a little bit from him, right? I mean, because like you said, his ability to outplay bigger guys for the ball, and he's at Long Beach Poly, right? He's not playing against, these little tiny private school kids in California like Amir Carlisle played against, right?
Yeah.
Where Amir Carlisle, at his size, 5'10", $185, was big in his league, right? I mean, Jason's playing against a bunch of future Division I football players, and he's outstanding. So it's an interesting deal, man. It's a great problem to have, right? How are you going to fit all these guys?
Yep.
I will ask you this. I know you want all three of them. If you could prioritize them, what would it be?
Man, probably Canyon, Robinson, and then Gilbert. Honestly, probably. I don't know. That's tough though. I mean, I don't want to prioritize them. I just want to take all three because they're just so different. It's like it's hard to prioritize because they just bring so much different things to the table. Like, they're not similar at all.
Yes.
It'd be much easier if you gave me like Micah Gilbert and another big body outside receiver that isn't like the biggest vertical guy of all time. Like, I'd be like, yeah, I'll easily dissect those guys. But comparing Micah Gilbert to Jason Robinson is like,
right.
What, man? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like, if I was going to say, okay, Ryan, how would you prioritize them? Canyon, and Bredell Richardson. Well, that's an easy one because they're somewhat
similar,
yeah. And or if I was saying, hey, Jason Robinson or Zion Reagans or Ryan Pelham or guys like that. It'd be an easy one.
Smaller guys,
yeah, right.
Exactly.
This one's a little bit harder. It is.
That's why I hate when people this happens in like the draft space all the time. It's like, which of these wide receivers do you like better? I'm like, they're all different. Like it's a very different conversation.
The other thing too is, Ryan, when we first got word of Notre Dame's interest in Isaiah Canyon, it's about the same time that you started seeing them backing off of a couple other guys.
Yeah.
Jeremiah McClellan being one. Because I'll give Notre Dame credit. They got on Isaiah Canyon before almost everybody else.
They did.
That's why they are where they are. They saw him. They saw that potential before anybody else did. And that's why they're in a great position to potentially close with that kid. Yep. Because, and that's something I give this staff, Chad Bowden. I mean, Chad Bowden's the one that found Armel Mukam last year. He's the one that found Brandon Hillman. It wasn't the position coaches, it was him. And similar thing here with Isaiah Canyon, and Jancy Stuckey also was part of that deal too, because obviously he's from Warner Robins, from the same city.
Yes.
Because this is the kind of kid that I've said this before. This is how Notre Dame has to recruit. For all the people that love the stars. Now he may eventually become a highly ranked guy.
Yep, he could.
But you've got to be first on these guys. You've got to find them before everybody else does. You got to be months ahead of Georgia if you're ever going to have a shot at getting a kid like this and keeping him. You're going to have to be months ahead of Ohio State, months ahead of Alabama, months ahead of these other teams. And they were. But it also caused them to back off some much more highly ranked players.
Yep.
That's the other part of it too. And so for people who might look at this ranking and be like, yeah, well, okay, just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that this staff backed off of much more highly ranked guys, including one guy that's probably going to go to Ohio State because they thought this kid was a better player. And we'll find out if they're right or not, but I tend to think that they are, to be honest with you. So, all right, let's talk about this last part real briefly, Ryan, because we've gone really long on these other segments.
Shocking.
Yeah, like longer than normal. This whole Deion Sanders thing going on at Colorado.
Yeah.
So basically what we're going to address is, number one, I'll say this. I have zero problem with Deion running a bunch of kids off that roster. Zero. That's what he was brought in there to do. They were awful. 1-11 last year. To me, I'm going to say arguably just out of respect, arguably the worst Power 5 roster last year. I don't actually think it's arguable.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to be disrespectful and say, well, your opinion doesn't matter if you think it's somebody different. I don't think that there's another school in the conversation for the worst roster in college football. It was awful.
At the Power 5 level.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a bad roster at the Group of 5 level. I just don't know if it's the worst. I mean, UMass is,
UMass is pretty bad. Yeah. Pretty bad.
Yeah. But I will say this. I have no issue with it. I have no issue with him telling kids, you need to find another place to play. My stance on that is I would much rather a coach be honest with a kid than to lie to him simply to keep him there for numbers.
Yeah.
This kid has no shot of ever playing for you. Now, if the kid chooses to stay, you let him stay, because you made a commitment to him. The school made a commitment to him. You didn't, but the school did. But there's a right way and a wrong way to go about doing this. And I realize that some of this could be sour grapes, but my whole thing is we're hearing enough from enough kids to where it's like, okay, there's too many kids saying this for it to just be complete BS.
Yeah.
And the notion is that not that he's telling kids to leave, but now he's not even helping these kids to try to find homes. They're not letting kids have access to practice film. Now, here's my stance on that. If a kid goes in the portal that you didn't necessarily want to go in the portal, I'm not obligated to help you find another school. You made a commitment to us. We made a commitment to you. You're choosing to break out to not honor that commitment. I don't owe you a thing. That's my stance, right? I'm just going to be honest with you. If if that's the case. A kid that I'm encouraging to go into the portal and I'm telling to go into the portal, you better help that kid out.
Yeah.
Because you're the one that is breaking that commitment. He signed a scholarship to your school. Unless he's a kid who was a rule breaker, got in trouble, was a bad person, bad character player, bad culture problem, you owe it to that kid to do what it takes to help him. The fact that we're hearing from a lot of kids now saying that they're not giving them access to practice film, even last year's practice film, which has no benefit for you as a coaching staff at all, is a really terrible look for Coach Sanders and Colorado. Really terrible look, and it needs to be rectified. I don't think every player has the right to get access to our practice film. If you leave our program, you have forfeited your rights. Like if you quit today, if you told me, hey, Brian, I'm quitting. Okay. And by the way, I'd like access to the admin. I'd like to be able to, take all my articles. No, I'm not going to help you with that, man. You're leaving. You don't work for me anymore. You know what I mean? But if I were to, I'm not going to say that other example, right? So like if you're choosing you don't want to be a part of this anymore, then I don't owe you anything. But if I'm telling you need to go do something for whatever reason, then yeah, I should do the right thing. And I'm breaking my commitment to you. I should honor that and help you get somewhere. That's my issue, Ryan. I just think it's a horrible look, man.
It's really bad. It's one of those situations where, because I agree with you, and this has been consistent of Deion. I mean, Brian, like we always talk about the coming speech, and it's just like a little bit corny, right? That they like videoed it the way they did and whatever. But from the moment Deion got there, he was like, not everybody's going to be here. Like he was honest, man, and he's been honest in that sense of it. But what's the core of what a coach is, though, for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
A coach is a molder of men. And in this instance of, I'm not going to help some of these players out that are going that I actually told to leave. Like, what, man? What? How can I trust you and think that you have my best interest if you told me to leave and you're not going to help me out in any way? Like that's just not right, man. It's not right. I mean, that's just the point blank period for me is that's not right. I mean, you cannot tell a kid that you care about him so much, but then also say like, you might not be the best person for this program. You should probably go somewhere else. And they completely turn your back on him. That's just shallow. And that is not, you're not telling that kid the truth. You're not telling that kid the truth. And in my opinion, programs need to be built on trust and they need to be built on, a complete understanding for what the expectation is every single day. And I just don't think it's a good model of how to treat people in this instance. Like that's the end all be all for me is that I think Deion owes it to some of these kids that are in certain situations to be compassionate towards them. Because this isn't an easy thing they're going through, man. Transferring schools, going to a new program, going to a new college, like that's a tough transition, especially when you were the one that elicited that movement, right? Like that's kind of where I'm at. So I think it's terrible. I really do. I don't have any problem with him being truthful with kids. Always be truthful, but also be compassionate. Like we can have some compassion as well.
Like look, Deion's delivery is what it is. I mean, people want him to stop acting like himself because he's a head football coach now. I don't like it. I wouldn't play for him. But this is who Deion is. Like, what were you expecting him to do? Like, walk in there and start talking different and acting different because he's a head football coach? Now, this is who Deion is. So I had no problem with the manner in which he told those kids when he first sat down. He said, look, most of y'all aren't going to be on his team next year, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, you did it a little. I mean, you did it for show. That's why you recorded it. You put it out, right? And I don't like that. I mean, it's just everything's a show. Having said that, how else is it going to get anybody to give a crap about Colorado football? I mean, so there's the, you have to understand all this. He's trying to bring, because we're talking, a Notre Dame show is talking about Colorado. Why?
Yeah, seriously.
Because it's Deion and because of the manner in which he's going about things, which is what he has to do to make Colorado relevant because he can't be relevant for what they're doing on the field right now. So what's he supposed to do? Sit back and shut up for 3 years until they win some games? No, that's not how it works. You can like or dislike the way he goes about it, but it's just Deion being Deion up to now. Because one of the things that Deion has always taken pride in, and I believe him when he says this, is part of the reason I feel like Deion has been a college coach and will stay a college coach And I don't think I don't see Deion becoming an NFL coach.
Yeah.
Because if anyone that knows Deion is known for a decade before he got into coaching, he did a ton to help young men.
Yeah.
Camps and all this. I mean, mentors. And I mean, he's always taken like troubled NFL players under his wing to try to help. Hey, man, like there's a way to, and he doesn't always advertise that stuff. He does a lot of that stuff behind the scenes, which tells me it's genuine. Now, some of that stuff he'll promote because you got to bring awareness to, hey, I'm doing this. But there's a lot of stories I've heard behind the scenes about things Deion has done as a mentor that you're like, he cares. He really cares.
Yeah.
That's why I have such a problem with this, because it's such a 180 different from what he's always been about. You say you're trying to help kids and then you're doing this. This isn't helping kids, man. This is only helping you. And so I think that's a bad look. I didn't like some of the stuff I heard about how the coaches treated the returning players. Like, look, again, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And the concern I have, because I actually want Deion to be successful. I've said this before. I want Deion to be successful. I want more programs that are going to take kids away from USC and Alabama, and because Notre Dame's not going. Colorado and Notre Dame are going to compete for very many kids. Let's be honest about that. He's going to hurt Texas more than he's going to hurt Notre Dame. He's going to hurt USC more than he's going to hurt Notre Dame. He's going to hurt Alabama more than he's going to hurt Notre Dame. Right?
For sure.
So I want him to be successful, but you're not going to be successful this way, because eventually you're going to get this reputation where kids are going to be like, yeah, I don't know if I can trust you, because what if it doesn't work out? You're going to screw my kid over and not help him out, not coach him, not treat him right. If he's not as good as other players, he needs to leave. And you tell him to leave and you're not going to help him out. You're not going to give him practice film. He needs to rectify this soon. And basically he needs to throw someone under the bus, right? I mean, he needs to throw, I don't know, some video, or himself. Hey, you know what? This is why I looked at it. This is why I did it. But now that I do it, I realize I was wrong. I mean, there needs to be, it can't just be, okay, just give him the film. There needs to be some sort of statement from Coach Deion, Coach Sanders, to say, hey, look, you know what? Here's why I made that decision. I was just looking at it. Like, I don't want our film getting out. And I'm just, we're already at a tough enough advantage as we are now without.
I understand that part.
And okay, I get that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know what? We asked these kids to leave, and I didn't do it the right way. Let's fix. I mean, this is repairable in my opinion. It is, and I hope that he does, because this is a bad look for him.
Agree.
But it's one he'll get the benefit of the doubt if he addresses it quickly and owns it and says, this is my bad. I made this decision. It was the wrong decision. Here's why I did it. And and that's not what I'm not about that life. I've always been about helping kids, and I'm realizing just because this kid can't help us, we're going to still do right by him.
Agree.
That's what they need to do, that, in my opinion, because this is just this is the kind of thing that could get your reputation, Ryan, that you do not want as a coach. Do not, because who's going to not be all about this anymore? You have a lot of mom and dads right now that are all about Deion. Rightfully so, that they're going to be like, nope, not now. Nope. So I hope he rectifies it. But it's also part of the problem with this whole portal process to begin with, because he knows I can go to the portal and get 20 kids. So I'm just going to run 20 kids off. And
at the end of the day, man, people talent is going to flock to Deion. There's no doubt. There's going to be a lot of talent that's going to flock there. So to your point, I mean, it is irreplaceable. It is replaceable. But if winning doesn't follow, it's going to be harder and harder to replace.
Yeah. I think there's some comments being made in the chat that I have a problem with, and I don't think that they're addressing. Antoine, I don't think you're addressing what we're talking about. Antoine said,
I think Antoine's just trolling a little bit.
He said Deion can close his eyes and pick somebody, and it will upgrade in the portal. Remember, everybody don't get picked to another school going to the portal. And then he says, the truth is you stink, son, and you're undersized, and to be real, you belong in the MAC. I know people can handle it. That's not what we're talking about. I have no problem with Deion basically saying, go somewhere else. I said at the very beginning, I'm a believer that if you don't think a kid can play for you, you should tell that kid that you don't think he can play for you. And then let him decide if he wants to stay and just get his degree or go somewhere else. My whole point is, but when you tell a kid, leave, who didn't break rules, it's not like a kid, put his hands on a female in the dorm. You're gone, and I'm not doing a freaking dang thing to help you. Matter of fact, you better not ask anybody to call me, because if they do, they're going to know exactly why you're not part of my program. You know what I mean? Totally fine with that. But when you're just booting a kid because he's just not a good football player, and then you're going to screw him over and not help him get somewhere, that's the problem. I have no problem with Deion processing kids out. In your first year, that should be allowed.
Yes.
And even if my rule that I would adopt, which is when a coach decides he doesn't want a kid, that kid should automatically be, because I believe bring back the 1 year sit out for transfers. But I also think there's a scenario where when a coach doesn't want a kid, coaches should be able to sign waivers to let the kid go somewhere now. And I'm okay with that. And then you go to the portal and replace those kids. You're going to drop 20 and sign 20. Cool. Totally fine. But don't screw those 20 kids over just because they're not good enough to play for you. That's the point. And that's what I don't like. And I hope that he fixes it, because, again, Ryan, I've said this, I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for Florida State to get good again. I'm rooting for Miami to get good again. Those things help college football, which in turn helps Notre Dame. And so I want Coach to be better. And Colorado's a tough enough sell as it is. You can't lose the one thing that makes him different, which he has a long history of helping young people just because he cares, with nothing really in it for him. Right? He can't lose. He can't afford to lose that. And that's my concern, Ryan. Anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
That's it, man. I think that he is great for Colorado. I think he is great for college football in a vacuum. But I think that you have to stay true to what got you there, man. And that's kind of the biggest thing, is that we have heard great things about Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, right? But this has to be one of those situations where there has to be compassion through certain situations, right? Like, you can't just turn your back on the kids that didn't do anything wrong at the end of the day. Like, they didn't do anything wrong. The ones that you just had a heart-to-heart conversation with, that they're just not right for the program. Yeah. So just kind of where I am.
Right. It's like I said, if a kid's got a crap attitude and he's a disruptive kid and you're booting him off the team because of discipline issues, I don't know you a thing. You didn't live up to your side of the contract. You didn't live up to your side of the scholarship agreement, which is you would conduct yourself in a way that represents this football program. I'm not helping you do a dang thing. I have no sympathy for those kind of kids. None. But that's not what we're talking about here. Right? And that's the thing that should be fixed. So that's going to wrap up this portion. We are going to go to a mailbag. We do have some questions. We're going to try to get through these as quickly as possible. Before we get there, folks, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast, and sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I can't wait till somebody cuts up that face you just made and puts it into a meme. That's going to be phenomenal. I cannot wait for that. That's amazing. I love it.
Call the bluff right now. It won't happen.
It won't happen. All right, we're going to get the mailbag next, but thanks for being with us on this portion of the Irish Breakdown podcast. So, Ryan, we're going to dive into the mailbag. I'm going to start off. We got some super chats down here, man. We got a big one from Double R. I appreciate you, man. And he says, I just put a hundo in. Love you guys. Any Drake Bowen info? Yeah, we'll give you Drake Bowen info for a hundo. Yeah, we'll do that.
I'll do just about anything for $100. So.
Whoa.
See, now that could get clipped.
Whoa.
That could get clipped.
Just pump the brakes on that one there, cuz. Look, I thought Drake had a great spring. I mean, he did. There's a lot he's still learning. You saw an example of that in the first series of the spring game. Yeah. He crashes the line hard, man. He got downhill in a hurry. Only problem is he hit the wrong gap. And the running back bounces outside, 30-yard gain. Yeah. But then he settled in and he made a lot of plays. The athleticism pops, Ryan. The physicality pops. I mean, and he's a little bit more, and I'll be honest with you, he's a little bit more instinctive than I thought he was going to be. Drake always struck me as a kind of just an athletic guy learning to play football. I was impressed by how instinctive he looked in the practices that we saw. You know, the patience that he showed. So, I mean, look, I had Drake as I think I had him as a top 50 guy. Let me go look. I might have had him as just a top 100 guy. Let me go look at my final grade for Drake because I don't remember all of them. And I want to make sure that I'm being accurate here. I had Drake as a top 50 prospect. He's backed that up. I mean, and that's honestly, you want to know what, Ryan? You know, one of the things that, and we didn't talk about this yesterday, we should have, what we learned about the spring. You want to know what one of the most exciting aspects of the spring was for me is the fact that a lot of our The things that we hoped for from the young guys turned out to be accurate. You know, man, I really hope this receiver class is really good. And you come out of spring saying they're as good as advertised. You come out of the spring saying this freshman linebacker class is as good as advertised. He got hurt, but prior to that, Christian Gray is as good as advertised. We didn't get to see the chance to see a Don Schuler. Didn't get to see much of Ben Minich. You look at Kenny Minchie and say he's raw, got a lot of work, but the arm pops, right?
Yep.
You look at Sam Pendleton, right? I didn't expect Sam to play, but you're like, boy, this kid's he is who I thought he was.
It's a worker.
There's been a lot of years where I'd go to fall camp and be like, this kid needs a lot more work to get to where I thought he was going to be. This group has shown it. And that's not so much an evaluation standpoint, because I mean, I always, if I didn't think my opinion on the kid was right, I wouldn't say it.
Sure.
But it's just more about that. It speaks to the differentness of these kids, the advancedness of their skill set, and the fact that this group came in right away with no fear, well, there's one kid that was hesitant in the spring, and that was Preston Zinner.
Yeah.
And then look what he did in the blue gold game.
Very Sam Hartman-ish of him.
Yeah, balled out, right?
Yeah.
So that's a positive, is the freshman class, and obviously Drake is part of that. To me, one semester in is as good as we'd hoped that they would be at this point in time. I'm very, very excited about that.
One thing I would say about Drake too, man, is that kid is a worker, man. I can't imagine playing football, baseball, and being a student at the University of Notre Dame and still flashing as much as he is on the football field, man. Like man, that's a lot of workload, man, but he is thriving in it right now. He really is. So I'm excited. I mean, he's 6'2", 232 pounds already, right? It's like that kid has a lot of upside, man. So I'm excited about him in the future. There's no doubt.
If you like Drake Bowen coming in, then you should be excited by what we saw this spring, because he's exactly what we'd hoped. And again, and if anything, in certain areas, maybe a little bit better, even a little bit better than I thought he was going to be. James O'Reilly with super chat or super sticker. James, thank you very, very much. We have another super chat here from Chief Brody.
Chief Brody says, good stuff as always, fellas. Thank you, Chief. I am worried that Tyler Buchner and Tommy Rees bowling out at Bama might say about what it might say about Notre Dame, especially if Notre Dame struggles on offense this year.
I mean, why are you you're literally assuming the worst case scenario with everything.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, okay. I mean, sure. If Tyler goes to Alabama and leads them to a title and Notre Dame's offense sucks, it's a bad thing for Notre Dame. But why would you assume that? I mean, a lot of bad things could happen. He could go down. I mean, I love you, Chief Brody. It's BK PTSD. It's not winning a title in 35 years. I get it. I'm not worried about that. I guess where I would say I'd be worried about it is if I thought there was a chance. I think the greater chance would be Tyler goes to Bama, and if he does ball out, and if Tyler goes somewhere else, right, I'm rooting for him. I am. Yep. I want him to be successful. I just think what would also happen is Notre Dame would also be really good on offense.
Agree.
And you'd say, okay, this is why Notre Dame was super high on Tyler Buchner. But then you're also going to say, but this is why they also brought in Sam Hartman.
Correct.
That's what I think is more likely. I think the second most likely one is Tyler doesn't win the starting job at Alabama and Notre Dame balls out. I think the least likely scenario by 1,000 miles is that Tyler balls out and Notre Dame stinks on offense.
And I would say if both sides ball out on offense, it evens out, right? Because it's like Tommy's gone and then it's a new offensive coordinator. Right. And so it just balances out, man.
And it's good for Notre Dame because kids will say, hey, look, I'll go there and compete because I know that I'll get coached up, get ready, and then I can go somewhere else if it doesn't work out, right? And it helps you with coordinators. Hey, Notre Dame, because what's the big knock is for a long time, Notre Dame was their coordinators were getting jobs at like Miami of Ohio and UMass and places like that. Now it's like, okay, Clark Lee gets an SEC job. Mike Elko gets a Texas A&M job, which leads to the Duke head coaching job. Lance Taylor gets an OC job at a Power 5 school, and then a year later he's a head football coach. John McNulty gets a Power 5 assistant coach gets a Power 5 OC job. Tommy goes and gets the Bama job, and if he does well, then that helps Notre Dame because hey, look, you can come here and make some money and get a chance to go to that a higher level, if not do that here. So I mean, look, I'm not rooting against Tommy. I'm not rooting against Tyler if Tyler goes somewhere else. My whole pushback is simply on the last part is, but that, I mean, I get it though, man. That's where we are as Notre Dame fans, right? I mean, it's
I
just
get it.
like everything that could go wrong. Hey, I like this George O'Leary hire. Wait a minute, what? He's being fired already?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just, that's been, man, I'm super fired up about this Charlie Weiss there. Look what it started. And then bam, 3-9.
Yeah.
It's just been the way that it's been, right? It's just, you always anticipate the worst possible scenario. So I get it, Chief. It's just, I just don't view it that way, man. And I'm also trying to be more concerted about looking at the positives. But part of the reason that makes it easier, Ryan, is there's a lot of flipping talent on this team.
For sure.
And then Chief did have a follow-up to that also, Ryan.
Chief says, follow up to your super chat, would be like Jack Cohn leaving Wisconsin and revealed to be a really good quarterback, but would be like 10 times that.
I mean,
sure. I mean, but like the difference between the Wisconsin to Notre Dame thing and the Notre Dame Alabama thing, right? I mean, I feel like Notre Dame Alabama is more on the same wavelength, closer than what Wisconsin Notre Dame is, right? Like, I just think that that's a very different. And also, I mean, if we're talking about the structure of an offense too, Brian, it's like it's tough for a quarterback to ball out at Wisconsin consistently, just based upon what they're asked to do, unless you're Russell Wilson for that 1 year, right? The difference between Notre Dame and Alabama shouldn't be as drastic as what it's been in years past. So I hope that it isn't this year, hopefully.
Right. I mean, yeah, I'm not worried about what you're worried about, Chief, just because I think Notre Dame's offense is going to be pretty good this year. And it's going to be pretty good this year. Bailey Brad. Today, man. Yeah, it is. Today, it is. It's good. But I think these kind of topics are going to help with that stuff, though. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Bailey Brad super chat. Bailey Brad, thank you so much for the super chat. Official statement from Colorado that all players can have film prior to spring of 2023 just came out. Oh, okay. So that's a little bit
which is good.
Then.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, here's the only thing. There needs to be a my bad from Coach Sanders associated with that, in my opinion, if he's going to completely eliminate any chance of there being any like left lingering like problems. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yes,
there needs to be a, you know what, I made this mistake. Because look, I think, we live in a society where people are always some groups of people are always looking to tear people down, right? And social media has created that. But I've said this before. I think there's the social media world, and then there's like the real world. I don't think like how people act on social media is, especially people like their name's not on there, their faces aren't on there. They're cowards. Yeah, exactly. In the real world, people still appreciate when you're willing to say, I was wrong. Right? Some of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten from people on the show are when I say, you know what, I was wrong about this kid, or I was wrong about this situation. Having what I can't stand is people just apologize all the time for every time somebody pushes back on you. Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. No, I'm going to stand and fight for what I believe in. But when I'm wrong, I'm going to say I'm wrong. And Coach Prime was wrong on this. He was wrong on this. It's okay. You need to beat him up on it. But part of forgiveness has to come from an asking of forgiveness. Of, hey, you know what? I screwed up. And I think most people would respect the heck out of him if he did that. Agreed. And it would actually grow his reputation, in my opinion. Because you'd see a human side of Deion. The side that you and I have heard about for years, Ryan, behind the scenes, about his compassion and his willingness to get in the community and help disadvantaged people that we don't see enough about. We see the flash. We see prime time. We see all that stuff, right? We don't see that part. The more people get to see that part of Deion, the better it's going to be for Coach Sanders, in my opinion.
Agree.
And this is an opportunity to say, you know what, show some humility. You know what, I screwed up. This is the world I'm coming from. This is the way I looked at it. It was wrong. I screwed up. We're going to give access to film to these kids. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. So we got a big one. My man, Mike Slade, my dude, just cuz. Mike, I appreciate you. Mike has been a friend to me and to Irish Breakdown for a very long time. And I don't know if I know anyone who loves University of Notre Dame more than my guy Mike. So, Mike, I appreciate you. Appreciate you. I got a chance. First time I met Mike was actually at a dinner we had the night before the Fiesta Bowl in 15 when Notre Dame played Ohio State. So, great man. Thank you, Mike. And I'm not just saying that because he gave us a giant super chat.
Yeah.
I felt that way anyway. Mike is really, really good people. So I appreciate
I feel like I'm in Jerry Maguire right now, man. Show me the money. It's crazy.
I appreciate you, Mike. I appreciate you very much, buddy.
Chat's
appreciate
awesome
you very
today,
much.
Man.
It is.
That's awesome today.
It's been fire. Let's get back up to hear some of these other questions, right? Appreciate you, Mike.
Grizz. Yes, Domer Grizz's question. In your opinion, is the staff not doing enough to create a culture where players want to stay even if they get passed up, or are the recent transfers just a symptom of current transfer portal era?
I fault Notre Dame 0% for the guys leaving right now.
Yeah.
Because, look, this is a part of it. Like, Lorenzo Styles was expected to be Notre Dame's leading receiver last year, and he's now 5th and might be falling. He wants to play. I got no problem with him somewhere else. My issues with Lorenzo Styles aren't him leaving. It's how he conducted himself when he was here. That's my issue. I don't think Tyler Buchner should have left, but I have no problem with him leaving. Right? I transferred after my freshman year. Guys are going to leave. And in some cases, you're going to want them to leave because you need the scholarships or because of personality differences. So, Lou Holtz had guys leave.
Yep.
I mean, Arnold Ollie played a ton for them on the 88 freshman team. He transferred. Kent Graham transferred because he wasn't playing enough. This is not new.
Dorsey Levens transferred too.
Dorsey Levens transferred. That's absolutely correct, Ryan. And there's plenty of guys. Yeah. So this isn't new, and you're going to have transfers. The problem is when you see mass exodus happening, especially from certain positions. So like that year we had all the guys leaving from receiver in like a year. You had like 5 guys leave the program in like a year at wide receiver. That's a problem, right? If like 5 offensive linemen transferred out this offseason, you'd be like, yo, there's a problem in the offensive line room. I'm just thinking of a position where they could lose a big number. I've heard nothing like that on the offensive line. No, I see no issue. It's just, it's just the way it is right now. And I don't like Tyler Buchner's situation is unique because, I mean, the one-time transfer portal thing obviously factors into it. But I mean, I understand his desire to. As a matter of fact, I also think Tyler, I could be wrong on this, but I think Tyler's on pace to graduate at the end of this next semester as well. Because he was an early enrollee. So he could have, even if the one-time transfer wasn't here, I think Tyler would be on pace to graduate early to where he could go. I also think Drew Pine got his degree. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not. But I do believe that Tyler is on pace to get his degree, which means he could have transferred anyway, even without the one-time rule. So it's just the nature of it. If you start saying like, whoa, this is odd, I also think it's symptom of not just the transfer portal era, but that's just the where we are in our society. It's this instant gratification. And if I don't get what I want, I'm leaving. Screw it. I'm quitting, basically. I can't stand it, but that's where we are as a society. I mean, the conversations I've had with friends of mine recently is just like, I had a friend of mine just say, like, kids are soft nowadays. I'm like, some are, right?
Some are.
But it's not so much that kids are soft. It's that they've been told this is okay to handle things this way. If kids were not able to conduct themselves this way, they'd stay and fight. But they don't have to. Why should they? You know what I mean? And what you're seeing at the Division I level is what we've seen at the Division III level for decades, because there is no sit-out rule, the Division III level. So you see all this kind of stuff. Now, part of that's because kids have to pay their own way there, but I'm talking about the roster turnover. It's not good for the game, but more importantly, it's not good for young people to have that this way where I don't have to fight. Do you know how many kids would have quit the 1988 team before they ever got a shot to be? I mean, I've talked to some of these guys. I'd have left after my freshman year the way it is now, and I would have missed out on so much because of it. Right? I have no problem with Kent Graham transferring. He wasn't going to play at Notre Dame. Yeah. No problem. I mean, Dorsey Levens was never going to play at Notre Dame, as good as he was, because look who he was sitting behind. So I'm okay with that. Transferring in itself is not bad, right? And for some kids, it's necessary. It's more of the culture that we've created of where kids just, if it's not going your way, just leave.
Find something
Don't
else.
fight.
Yeah.
Don't battle. Don't, and that's not true of every kid that transfers. It's too much of that. Don't worry about how this impacts your teammates. Just you do you. I can't stand that. I can't, not in this sport. I can't stand that. All right.
Does happen more and more, though.
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeff Fluke's question. Brian, what song was in your head? I hope it's Kadeur. What?
I don't know.
What is this from?
I don't know what the heck that means. Danza Kadeur. I don't know what that means. So
I don't know what that is either.
like late last night, I tweeted something. I was like, I get songs stuck in my head all the time, right?
Oh, okay.
But the song that's been stuck in my head the last 2 days is a song that's in Spanish. I don't understand a word that's being said, but I love it. It's a song by Shakira. I think it's like Te Felicito or something, Felicito, something like that, because I don't speak Spanish. But I love the hook. I love the beat. I don't know what the heck they're saying, but the sound is good. It's just, I don't know why. It's just been stuck in my head. And obviously, it's easy for Shakira to get stuck in my head. But yeah, it's just a really good song. And I love her sound. I mean, it's genuine. I mean, yes, she's beautiful and all that, but I love her voice. She's got a very unique voice. Yeah. So, yeah.
Can you sing the song for us? Or?
No, I cannot.
Oh, okay.
$299 super chat's not going to get me to sing that song.
How much do you need?
I don't speak Spanish, right? No habla inglés. I mean, español. Yeah. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So no, I don't speak Spanish, but it's a great song, great beat. And there's a dude in it. I don't know the dude's name. I've never heard him before, but he's got a really good sound too. It's just stuck in my head. But I don't understand a word that they're saying. I don't understand a word they're saying. What I did was I did take the main, like the main chorus type Google of thing, Translate. and I put it to the Spanish to English translate. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Now I understand at least what they're talking about. I don't know what the heck they're saying, but I know what they're talking about now. So, but yeah, that's the song that's stuck in my head. It was funny, like the responses that people gave to it was pretty funny. But yeah,
it's fantastic.
It's a good song. Really good
Hips
song.
Don't Lie. I want to see a rendition of Hips Don't Lie by Brian Driscoll on this podcast. Please.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Trust me, you don't.
I do.
Believe that. All right, let's move on to Rob Hoskins' question.
Ryan
is going off the rails, everybody.
Oh, I'm not, man. I haven't had any coffee today either, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
Rob's question, part 1. Great article about Tyler Buchner on the boards. If he decided to come back, would you, as the coach, take him back or have a team meeting first and have input from the team?
Then I'll go to part 2 here.
Yeah, part 2 is I remembered. Oh, sorry. You want to answer this first?
No, I did that. No, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted you to read part 2, and then I clicked away from it. I wanted you to remember it.
Gotcha. I remembered Katie's comments from yesterday about setting up a precedent. What would you do?
Well, in this particular instance, the coaches already have a pretty good idea of how Tyler Buchner is viewed by his teammates. Sure. So I don't think that a team meeting is needed. I think that they're aware of what the teammates feel about Tyler's decision and why. I think there's a clear recognition of, the thing about Tyler's not like a real rah-rah guy. One of the things I've heard about him is he's had kind of a girlfriend most of his time. He spends a lot of time with her. He's just, he's not like at all the parties and center of attention. It's just not who he is. He's more of a quiet, reserved guy. So he's different, but he's still respected. He's still liked because they accept him for who he is, that's just Tyler being Tyler. But I know when he get on the pads, he's going to ball out. He's going to, and he's well liked by his teammates. That's why I didn't I was told that other sites were reporting that there was a locker room issue, and I haven't heard any of that stuff. No locker room issue. And if there's going to be a locker room issue when a quarterback left, it would have been when Drew Pine left. He was much more of that leader, rally the troops kind of. He just wasn't as good as Tyler. So there's no need to have a team meeting. I want to also make sure that I'm clear about this. I never said I wouldn't take Tyler Buchner back. I never said that there's not scenarios where you would embrace a player back. My point was simply that I would not have wanted it announced. I didn't start, but somebody made a really good point. I don't remember if it was on the message board or in the chat, but I remember somebody else saying this, and it hit me. So this was not an original thought by me, but somebody said, it makes a lot of sense hearing that he might come back by the way he had made that announcement. for him to say, why would he say that he's got the option of coming back if that's not already in his head? I didn't think about that. Like, I just was like, okay, he's leaving. Like, you don't, it is what it is. And that's a great point. If Tyler's saying, thankfully, basically, the door to come back is still there, then in his head, he was already thinking about possibly coming back. My only issue is, again, I wouldn't have said it publicly because, again, it sets a bad precedent. I don't want it out there that you can go test the waters, and if you don't like what's out there, you can come back. I don't want that. I don't want that to be the option where then the next time some kid says, well, I want to do that too. Well, no. Well, hold on a second. Now all of a sudden you're starting to have locker room issues.
Right. Well, I think the background of him being a good part of the team it makes it different, right, Brian? Like, you made the analogy to, do you remember in what was, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name, but the 1980 Winter Olympics hockey team, what is that movie called?
The Miracle?
Miracle. Yeah. So a Miracle on Ice, that whole scene where they bring in, I think it was name was Timmy Hare or something like that onto the team. Right. And the team was like, no, we this can't be a thing type of thing. So they basically had their own team meeting and brought it to Herb Brooks. Right. But that whole conversation is you're bringing a person from the outside that you don't know, right? A guy that isn't used to the program that you don't know in that situation. All these people know Tyler Buchner. All the coaches know Tyler Buchner. All the coaches know Tyler Buchner. So to your point, they have a vibe of how Tyler fits into this program. This isn't something where it's I don't know how he's going to mesh. If he's liked by the players, then I don't think that that's a need to have that conversation, to your point.
And somebody said, Katie asked, would they bring Prince Collie back? And again, every circumstance is different.
Yes.
The reason that I personally would not bring Prince Collie back is because he's been telling people he wants to leave for months.
Yeah.
I don't want, you're not bought in. And I understand and appreciate and respect the reasons that you're not bought in. And again, for some kids, it is better for them to leave. And not because they're a bad kid it's just, you're going to have a better shot at playing somewhere else. And I'm totally fine with that. I don't have a problem with that per se. So do what you got to do, man. It's all good. But, you've said enough to where it's best that you leave. We both agree it's best for you to leave.
Yep.
I would not embrace Lorenzo Styles coming back for a bunch of different reasons. I would embrace some other. There's been other guys that have gone in the portal. I was all aboard when Houston Griffith said he wanted to come back. I was all about that because the difference between Houston Griffith's situation and this one is when Houston Griffith jumped in the portal, that was before Marcus Freeman was hired as the defensive coordinator.
There's a coaching change, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and Houston had always been a good teammate. He'd been a hard worker. He'd never got in trouble. He went to class. He did things the right way. He was well-respected in the locker room. Bring him back. You know what I mean? There's been other kids I would have said, bring him back. If Lawrence Keys decided he wanted to come back, I'd have brought him back because of how he was viewed in the locker room. Other guys, oh, you got to go. You got to go, buddy. Sorry. Love you. Appreciate you, but you got to go. So it's a it's a situation by situation conversation you need to have. And, it's like some kids decommit and you don't try to convince them back because you're like, no, this is good. Deion Colsey decommits and the staff and Tommy fought hard to get him back because they knew Deion is a fit here and we want him and need him. Other guys have decommitted and they're like, best of luck to you. You know, it's the similar situation in my opinion. So it's good questions. Here we go.
From Fighting Irish Fan 91. Well, I don't know how I almost got 51 out of there. I know Brian said Jaden Riddell isn't a Michael Mayer level player, but is he not better than Jack Larson's ceiling? Notre Dame dropped Jack Nichols' commitment in the past. Could they do a similar for a Riddell type player?
Well, here's the difference. Jack Larson's really good.
Yes.
Jack Nichols wasn't a Notre Dame caliber player. Well, he was good, but not at this level, right? Like he wasn't a Notre Dame caliber kid. Jack Larson is. I feel like because Jack committed so soon and he hasn't seen the rankings jump that Cam Williams did, that all of a sudden like he's viewed as some like 3-star kid. Jack Larson's a good football player.
He's a very good player. Yeah.
He's a top 200 caliber kid. He doesn't have great size. He's not burnt. He's a great round. I mean, what I've said about Micah Gilbert, I also believe about Jack Larson. He has he's in the top 3 or 4 of the best catchers of the football in the tight end class in the country.
I really like the Nick O'Leary comp, man. Jack Larson is very Nick O'Leary-ish.
Ah,
He was a
thank
very
you.
good college player.
You don't
Very good
always
college
like
player.
my comps, so I like that one. But
I like good comps.
But
I like
what?
good comps.
Okay. Hey, Ryan, real quick, we're going to now have a meeting after the show. We're going to have some things to talk about. But no, what was Nick O'Leary's greatest strength?
Those hands,
Phenomenal
man.
hands and route running. What was his biggest knock? Size and speed. Right?
He didn't wear gloves.
But to your point, he was a heck of a college football player.
Really good.
He was also their tight end on the national championship team. And so, no, Jack's not a top 100 guy because he doesn't have elite size or speed, but that's a darn good football player. So, no, you don't want to do that to Jack Larson, because he's really good. I want him. Yeah. And honestly, I think his attitude better fits Notre Dame than Jaden Riddell's. That's the other part of it. Jaden Riddell is not that much better than Jack Larson. Is he better? Yeah, he is. Jack, to me, is a top 200 kind of guy. Jaden Riddell is a borderline top 100 guy. I have him in the bottom half of 100, right? Like 70 to 100 for me for Jaden Riddell. You may have him a little bit higher. Jack Larson's a top 200 guy for me. That's not a huge difference.
I wasn't that high. I mean, I liked Riddell, but I was actually higher on Carter Nelson personally. But that was just my opinion.
What I had said, Ryan, and I think you and I have talked about this. Jaden Riddell's the better receiver or the better player now compared to Carter Nelson.
As a tight end.
Carter Nelson has the higher upside. I mean, Carter Nelson has one of the 3 or 4 highest upsides in this class.
Yes.
He just needs to develop his body in his game because he plays 8-man football and he's skinny. He's a shooting guard right now.
Yes.
But there's not this giant gap between Jack Larson and Jaden Riddell, in my opinion. Yep. There isn't. And I think that Jaden Riddell has kind of come into this whole thing of he's the hot name. His rankings have grown. But when Jack Larson committed, he was higher ranked than Jaden Riddell by most.
He was.
But there's just no reason not to jump him up now. So I have no desire to push Jack Larson out of this class. And you know who else doesn't have a desire to push him out of the class? Notre Dame.
Yeah.
They love Jack Larson.
They do.
Right? Now, you may not as a fan, and that's cool, but because the other thing about Jack Nickel is there was not consensus agreement that they should have taken him in the first place. There was no disagreement on taking Jack Larson. None. Everybody liked Jack Larson and still do. And the guy that recruited him and wanted him is now the offensive coordinator.
Yes.
He's not going anywhere, nor should he, in my opinion. So they're different types of players. And there's also something to be said for guys who are completely bought in, and Jack Larson is completely bought in. We can't as fans get pissed off when kids who are committed then start going around when we then say, well, maybe they should drop this kid because somebody else better came along. No.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place for that. But the time and the place is when there's some sort of unique circumstance. Cedric Irvin's situation was unique circumstance because the coach he committed to was no longer here.
Right. Coaching change. Yeah.
The 2 coaches that primarily drove him coming, Brian Kelly and Lance Taylor, were gone. And the new coach said, hey, look, I don't think you can play for me. I respect that. I know they didn't like it, but I would you rather have them lied to you and brought you here knowing you'll never play there? Or can you maybe go to Stanford where you can play there? Jack Larson's situation is everybody that wanted Jack Larson is still here, including the quarterback in that class. So why would you push him out of the class? That kid can play. So, fair question, just not where reality. I would go with this one. Yeah. Here's an interesting one, Ryan.
Question is from Adam Blair. Do you guys think Cam Williams is the best receiver in the country? Personally, I do. Adam, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think me and Brian were pretty much on the same wavelength that Cam is definitely a top 5 receiver in the 2024 class, in my opinion. But I mean, there's other guys that are very good, right? He's in the conversation with a bunch of studs, though. But I mean, you have Jeremiah Smith, Micah Hudson. There's some guys, man.
There's really 2 right now, Ryan, that I would definitely have ahead of Cam.
Yeah.
But that's the only ones that I would definitely say, and that's Jeremiah Smith and Micah Hudson.
I'll say this is that Cam has put him in the conversation with anybody nationally with the season he just had, though. He has, literally, it's not idiotic to say, who's better, Cam Williams or Micah Hudson, for instance. That conversation could be had.
I would entertain it. Same with Jeremiah Smith. I'd entertain it. Now, I would rank those guys higher than Cam.
Absolutely.
Jeremiah Smith would be because he's so big. I mean, he's huge. and he can run. Micah Hudson, because he's so dynamic and explosive.
Yeah.
But Cam brings things to the table that Micah Hudson doesn't. And Micah
100%.
Hudson brings things to the table that Cam Williams doesn't. Right? That's true of Jeremiah Smith as well. And there's some other really good receivers in this class. It's but Cam's in that conversation, Ryan. Absolutely in that conversation with those guys. We'll find out if where he's going to end up. But yes, I grade him as a top 50 player right now. He's not quite a 5-star guy for me just yet. And the only two guys that I have given a 5-star grade to in this class are actually the only one is Jeremiah Smith. I had Micah Hudson as the 4.5-star guy too, but that was off of sophomore film. I have not regraded him from junior film. I would imagine that after watching it, because my grade is not a gut. I actually have a grading system that I evaluate and grade. Sometimes guys don't grade. Like I remember this, like Kurt Heinrich coming out was the guy that I didn't think that was going to grade all that high, but then when I actually popped in his grade and graded him, I graded out higher than I thought he was going to grade out. That's just because your gut sometimes it's easier for your gut to express the bias that you have than it is for a detailed grading system. Because for receivers, I've said this, I have a bias towards big receivers.
Yeah.
So I come up with a grading system that kind of changes that a little bit, or somewhat pushes back on that because so that the size and strength doesn't dominate the grading system like other things. And so, but my gut is that based off junior film, Micah Hudson's going to be a 5-star. I just haven't typed in the numbers like I had before. That's so I should make sure I'm clear.
But I'll say this: if Cam Williams has a jump even close to what he had from sophomore to junior year, then he is going to be in that conversation as well.
100%.
That was a massive jump.
I mean, you're not nuts for bringing it up now. Like at no point in time we say, "Hey, Adam, you're wrong.
Right,
you're wrong, dude. You're dead wrong. You're nuts." Right?
It's conversation.
It's a conversation to have. I just personally, if I'm being honest and fair, I just think those two kids right now I grade out higher. I haven't seen everybody. But I've probably graded 50 receivers in the 2024 class. And those are the only two right now that I have graded higher than Cam so far. There's some other guys I got to see, though. That's why I'm just not willing to say for sure he's number 3 because there's just not enough guys. And speaking of, I'm bringing this one up here real quick because I want to speak on this one.
Question from Archer452. What's up, Archer? He said, Ohio State wide receiver class is shaping up to be Jeremiah Smith, Mylan Graham, and Jeremiah McClellan, and taking Josiah Trader if he decides he wants to leave Florida. That could be Heartline's best class yet, which is saying something.
I'm going to disagree with that. I don't think it's as good as last year's class. I don't. I just got done saying I think Jeremiah Smith is my top receiver, but they also signed my top receiver last year in Brandon Ennis.
Yeah, Brandon Ennis is really good.
And Mylan Graham is really good. He's a borderline top 100 guy. He's not a 5-star like people make him out to be. Like On3 has him as a 5-star. Have you seen Mylan Graham's junior film, Ryan? He's very good.
Very fast.
If he had grades and wanted to come to Notre Dame, I'd take him in a heartbeat. But he's more 75 to 120-ish for me. Jeremiah McClellan is more of a 150-ish to 200 kind of guy to me. I haven't seen Josiah Trader. I don't believe.
Good. He's really good. Yeah.
But last year's class to me, I mean, you had Brandon Ennis was in my top 10. Cardinal Tate was a top 50 player. And I had Noah Rogers as a top 50 player. I had 3 top 50 players in last year's receiver class for Ohio State. And then the other kid that they got, the other Rogers kid,
Rogers,
I liked a lot. I mean, he's a really good player. So I don't think this class – now, look, Archer, that could change after senior film, right? Because I'm grading that class off of senior film. But even if I go back to what sophomore film was, I actually had Cardinal Tate graded out higher – junior film. I actually had Cardinal Tate graded out higher after his junior year than his senior year. I don't think he should have gone to IMG. I don't think he improved on the field at IMG. Now, it might have made him better in some ways. It's going to help him in college, but just from my evaluation ability, I have a hard time saying this year's class is going to be as good as last year's, just because I don't think Graham and McClellan are what some of the ranking services make them out to be. I don't know what your stance is on that part, Ryan, but like when I look at Jeremiah McClellan, I see people ranking him in the top 100, and I'm just like, I
think McClellan's a top 150 kid. I think he's a top 150.
And that's fair. I'm with you on that. And then I think Mylan Graham, I think it's on 3 that has him ranked in the top 20. So looking at Jeremiah McClellan, his ranking actually right now is where it should be. He's ranked between 142 and 200. ESPN does him on the top 300. So his ranking is actually fair. That's fair. Mylan Graham is now a consensus top 50 recruit. And he's as high as 12 and as low as 46. And I like him a lot. I don't see him. He's not there for me. You know what I mean? And if I'm looking at last year's class, he's my 4th receiver. He'd be, of the last 2 years, Mylan Graham's 5th for me. I'd have Jeremiah Smith ahead of him, obviously. I'd have Carnell Tate. I'd have Brandon Ennis, and I'd have Noah Rogers. And matter of fact, just so I can say that I have watched him, I'm actually going to pull up Josiah Trader now, Ryan, and watch him. So it's Josiah, correct?
Josiah
Isn't
Trader,
that?
yeah,
right?
Josiah.
So I'll watch him now too. But isn't he from the same high school as Bredell Richardson, or am I thinking is it a different high school?
Is it Carroll Day?
No, that's right. It's Chaminade. That's right. He's from Chaminade, Madonna.
Oh yeah, he's the Madonna. Yeah, Chaminade Madonna. That roster's stupid, by the way.
Now listen, Archer, don't get it twisted. That's a really darn good receiver class if they get all 4 of those guys. I just think that last year's Ohio State class was insane, and it was better than the one the year before. I mean, last year's Ohio State class for me is on par, Ryan, with the Marvin Harrison Emeka class, because I mean, that class was really good, but I think what makes the last year's receiver class so good isn't just that the top 2 guys were so good and ranked so high. It's that how much I liked 3 and 4. You know, because like you look at the year from the year before, you had Emeka and Marvin Harrison, and then your number 3 receiver was Jaden Ballard. He's a nice player. There's a big drop off between those first 2 guys and Jalen Ballard. The Brandon Ennis as a prospect is not as good as Marvin Harrison, but he's close. Carnell Tate to me actually is a prospect. It's very similar, if not slightly better than Emeka was. The top 2's point is they're very similar.
Yeah.
Noah Rogers was a much better prospect coming out than Jaden Ballard, in my opinion. And then that class only had 3, and then this class had the other Rogers. What's his first name again?
Bryson Rogers?
Bryson.
Yeah.
Bryson,
yeah.
yes.
Bryson Rogers.
So he's a really good football player. So I'm gonna as we're going to the next question, I'm gonna watch Josiah Trader, but just to kind of give my opinion on that one. But I don't think he's committed. He's not committed yet, right?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Next question from Rob Lobo 123 says, does the coaching staff consider moving Rico to safety if there are no good safeties in the portal? Rico's high school coach thought he was a better safety than receiver.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I would.
Did the coach say that? I literally talked to the coach
that,
before. I never heard that either. But
yeah, I don't care if you thought that. I mean, look, you need to find other safeties, but I'm not taking a guy from, because now all of a sudden if you move, look, Notre Dame is fine right now at receiver after losing Lorenzo Styles because of where they are, but they can't afford another loss at receiver. Right. That's my point.
Yep.
And especially a guy that you think can play for you right now. I couldn't do that. There's plenty of remove Ryan Barnes, who actually plays defense. Because here's the thing: if you move Rico, you've got to teach him everything. Everything. You're just adjusting a kid moving to safety. I mean, there's some alignments you got to teach him that, but he already knows what the coverage structures are. He already kind of has an idea of what the calls on defense are. It's not as big of a change. You move a kid who's only been here a semester to defense when his whole thought process playing offense. That doesn't make a lot of sense, and there's no way. If I was Chancey Stuckey and Jared Parker, that's one of those ones I'm fighting hard to get that one negated.
Yeah.
Hard. Like, I'm not letting that happen. Not letting that happen if I have any chance of avoiding it.
I never saw any Rico film on defense. I'm trying to
I did. There was some. Bit. He would hit you, and he would stick you. But I view him as just a kid who was very athletic. Not necessarily a kid that was a natural safety for me. But yeah, he's a much more natural wide receiver than he is a safety.
I might have to hit his coach up and see if he did actually say that. That's interesting. If so. Yeah.
He could have just been hyperbolic just to make a point about how good the kid is too.
Yep.
All right, here we go.
Next question from Andrew Burke. Do you think Marcus Freeman approved Tyler's post about jumping into the portal? Why would Tyler post that if he wasn't already leaning to
This
come
is
back?
the one. This is so the post I was referring to earlier. This must have been the one. So it was Andrews that I was looking at.
Yeah.
What I have said is I wouldn't have had him post that. I don't think Tyler post that if Marcus Freeman doesn't, isn't okay with it.
Probably not. He doesn't seem like the kid to do that,
No,
right?
not at
And they
all.
also have to make that graphic and everything too,
Correct.
right? It's like
Correct.
yeah,
I believe Notre Dame usually makes that stuff for them. Yes.
Yeah.
So I was him. I would not have allowed him to do that, or I would have asked him not to do that. And I would explain to him why. Again, he's 20 years old. Like I can talk to him like an adult, right? I mean, you're an adult. There's a chance you could be my starting quarterback. I need you to be an adult. So we're going to sit down and say, look, Tyler, here's the reason I don't want you to say anything about this. Let's just, let people know this is what you're going to do. And if you decide you want to come back, we would love to have you back.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. And it's not like this, oh gosh, such a stupid thing to do. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I don't think that is the right move. And it was definitely not one that I would have gone to. So a little more receiver recruiting here.
Coleman Smith says, is Notre Dame's chances with Jeremiah McClellan completely shot? Haven't heard anything about him in a while on any site connected to Notre Dame. Coleman, we talked about this a month ago, probably. At least a month ago. Notre Dame basically, it's just there are other players on the board that they've decided to focus on. So Jeremiah McClellan is not being looked at by Notre Dame any longer. We kind of went through it earlier. The wide receivers that Notre Dame is keeping close ties on, obviously, that we've talked about is obviously Cam Williams. We talked about Isaiah Canyon. We talked about Micah Gilbert. We talked about Jason Robinson Jr. Those are kind of the guys that they have zeroed in on mostly.
And then if they miss on those guys, that next level board is like Bredo Richardson,
Josiah Brown.
They've pretty much moved on from Jeremiah McClellan a while ago.
Yeah.
And like I said before, it was about the time that they started making their push for Isaiah Canyon. All three of those guys to me are better prospects than Jeremiah McClellan, who I like, by the way. He's a good player. I just think I think Jeremiah McClellan's a really good football player, but I think his ceiling is a little bit more limited compared to those other guys. That's my issue with him, Ryan. But he's a good football player. He is. That'd be a good pickup for Ohio State. He's a kid that's got a chance to be one of those really polished kids. Like he's not going to be like a burner. He's going to be that guy that's just like really good route runner, knows how to get open. And, you look at him and say, boy, this guy doesn't have the camp times, but he's just a really good football player. That's how I feel about Jeremiah. So I don't want this to come across, oh, he stinks. He's not that good. Oh, good riddance. I'm not saying that. I just think there's better guys on the board.
You don't call a kid a top 200 player nationally that stinks, right? Like that.
Right. Exactly. He's a good football player. Yeah. I just think there's better guys on. And if they weren't on Isaiah Canyon and Micah Gilbert and Jason Robinson, I'd be happy to be on Jeremiah McClellan. It's just, I'm okay with them passing on him because there are better players. There's no other reason. And from everything we've been told, Ryan, you've gotten to know him. He's a pretty good kid. He'd fit at Notre Dame. There's no doubt. I just think there's just better players on the board, in my opinion.
From Coleman Smith, back to back here. He said, did everyone see that Jared Smith committed to Michigan? Of course, as the defensive lineman out of the state of Connecticut, Cheshire Academy that Notre Dame was recruiting for a while. As much as it pains me to say, Michigan is on fire on the trail right now. Yeah,
Michigan's doing well in recruiting right now.
Well. They're a lot better than last year.
Yeah, last year. They're finally taking advantage of the success that they've had. There's no doubt. They picked up Brady Priestcorn, who's a quality tight end. I mean, he's a good player. I just like Jack Larson better. And I like Jack Larson's film better. I think that Jack Larson also fits better. Brady is a 6'6", kind of a traditional tight endish kind of guy. He's a lot like Cooper Flanagan and Eli Raridan and the guys I already have. The thing I like about Jack Larson is Jack Larson is a better fit for what Notre Dame was looking for in this class. They were looking for more of a H-backy type of guy.
Move guy.
Yeah. And so the fit was better, but he's a quality football player. And I thought Jack outplayed him at Irish Invasion as well. Jack was the best tight end there. And the kid from the Betancourt kid from Illinois was there.
Yeah.
Priestcorn was there, and Jack was the best tight end that day. I mean, he just was. Jordan Marshall's a quality player. He's another guy that was at Notre Dame's Irish Invasion, and E.S. Williams just was better and had better fun. But he's a very good football player. Good pickup for them. I think Jaden Davis is very overrated, but he's still a good football player. He's still a top 200 player to me. I just don't think he's a top 100 guy. Definitely not a 5-star guy. That's a good football player. Their offensive line class so far is really good. I like it. Mason Curtis, linebacker from Tennessee, is a good player. Jared Smith's a good football player. I like Jared Smith. I think Notre Dame there's better guys on the board, but we argued this like a week ago. This is a good football player, and if he ends up at Notre Dame, he's a good football player. It's a good pickup. He's just not a needle mover, and he's not from Michigan either. And the only one that I like, I'm not super high on Jacob Oden at this point in time. He's got a Notre Dame looked at early, and I just was like, that's just no. Mm-mm. He's committed to Michigan too. But that's a good early start, Ryan. I mean, it's 14 kids.
Jacob Oden was at the Irish Invasion you were at as well, I believe, right?
He was okay. He was okay. But it's a good class. It's just, to me, not quite. It's not quite what they're making it out to be, because the best recruit in the class is not the best recruit in their class, and that's Jaden Davis. You tell me, Ryan, what am I missing? Because I
need to watch more.
He's not even in my top 10 in the class of quarterback, Ryan. He's a 4-star, but like Rayola's better, CJ's better, Michael Van Buren's better. Just the kid, I can never remember this kid's last name. The kid going to Florida State that just recommit, like just said, hey, I'm not going anywhere. He's a much better quarterback than he is. Julian Sayen's a better quarterback than Jaden. I mean, it's just 5 off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And there's some other guys. I don't see it with Jaden Davis. I just don't.
I need to watch him. I haven't thoroughly watched him yet.
Yep.
He's going to Michigan, so I don't think I need to watch him, to be honest.
Well, I mean, I'd like to get your thoughts on it, but yes.
It was a joke.
I know. All right, let's get down to this next one, Ryan.
Next question is from John Waynes Winchester. Is there any world in which Notre Dame could have the number 1 overall draft pick next year, or is that Jabroni at South Carolina?
Southern Cal.
Sure. That's what I say. What did I say?
South Carolina.
Oh, I'm sorry. Southern Cal Sharpied in at the top spot. Sorry, I was just funny that you were calling Caleb Williams a jabroni. Sorry.
Well, here's the reason I would say I think Caleb Williams is going to be the number 1 pick no matter who has it, because I think what would happen is if a team that already has a quarterback has the number 1 pick, they would trade it to someone else who wants the quarterback. Would you agree that's probably what happens?
That usually happens, yeah.
Could I see a scenario where Joe Alt is the number 1 overall pick? Yeah, I could. It just depends on what kind of year he has and who has the number 1 pick. So I'm trying to think of a scenario, Ryan. Like, let's just say, does Carolina has the number 1 pick this year, right?
They traded up for it, yep.
And so they won't have the number 1 pick next year, correct? Because they traded their first rounder, so they won't have it, right?
Correct. Yep.
So I'm trying to think of where do you project right now Bryce Young going?
Oh, number 1. He's going to go number 1
to Carolina.
Yes.
Where do you see CJ Stroud going?
Colts.
It doesn't have to be so Colts at 4.
Yeah.
So let's say next year the Colts are not good again, and they have the number 1 overall pick. This is for argument's sake, right?
Yeah.
They're like, look, we got a great guard. We don't have a left tackle. I don't know if they do or don't. I'm just making a point. We have a chance to get a generational left tackle to protect our generational quarterback, our franchise quarterback. Or excuse me, not generational. We have a franchise left tackle that we can draft to protect our franchise quarterback. You're going to have to give me a lot to move me off of this spot.
Right.
I could see that. I'm not predicting. I'm saying I could see that if Joe Alt, because the reason I say that, Ryan, is because to me, there are really only 3 positions right now, the way the game is, that will go number 1. Quarterback, left tackle, D-end. That's it. D-line. That's it. You're not going to see a linebacker pick number 1.
No.
It's been it's been decades since we've seen a receiver go number 1. I think Keyshawn was the last one, I believe.
Keyshawn was the last one. Yep.
You're not going to have a tight end go number 1. You're not going to have a corner go number 1. You're not going to have a safety go number 1, and you're not going to have a linebacker go number 1. I mean, am I? Unless somebody, it would blow the draft world away if one of those positions went number 1, right?
Yes. Yep.
Well, Joe Alt plays one of those premium positions where we have seen guys get picked number 1 overall. It's just that
Still very rare, though. I think the last offensive tackle go number one is who? Eric Fisher, probably?
Probably. Yeah.
And then before that, it was Jake Long. I remember he was the first by the Dolphins.
We see guys that kind of get picked in the top 5, but it's just kind of one of those things. It would have to depend. Like, so here's where the number one tackles have been picked in the last decade. The last 10 years, so last year, 6, 7, 9.
Yep.
Year before that, 7. Year before that, 4 and 10. Year before that, 11. Year before that, 9.
Yep.
Year before that, 20. That was a bad tackle class. The year before that, 6 and 8. Tunsil went 13. Tunsil was probably going to go higher if not for the issues he would
have been in top 5 at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
13 before that, 2 overall. Craig Robinson, 2 overall. Jake Matthews at 6.
Don't remind me of the Greg Robinson pick by the Rams.
Eric Fisher in 2013 was 1.
Yes.
Matt Khalil was 4.
Yep.
I mean, so you're saying top 5. Trent Williams is 4. It always depends on who has the pick.
Right.
That's the thing. If I'm a team and I'm picking 3rd or 4th, I'm getting extra capital to let that other team to move up to number 1, and I'm hoping that Joe Walt's still there at number 3 or 4. That's my hope.
If you have a franchise quarterback and you're still picking number 1, that probably tells you that your roster stinks, right? So trading back is probably the best option in that situation.
But again, unless if I need a D lineman, I'm trading back. But again, I'm a big believer that if you just took a franchise quarterback and you get a chance to draft a franchise tackle, but I don't know that Joe Walt's there yet. And that's the other part of this, right? He could be there. If he makes that big year 3 jump as a starter, then sure, he could be in that conversation.
Yep.
I definitely think he'd be in that conversation if he stays for another year after that, even more so. But he could be. And the question was, is there any world in which that happens? Yeah, there's a world in which that happens. Sure.
There's a world.
And he's the only kid on the roster that could be that because of the position.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. So,
yep.
I'm trying to see like the number 1 overall picks in the last let's go back to since Keyshawn in 97, right? 96, Ryan. Since then, the number 1 overall pick, offensive tackle, quarterback, D end, quarterback, D end, quarterback, offensive tackle, quarterback, offensive tackle, defensive end, quarterback, defensive end, quarterback, defensive end, and this year it's going to be quarterback. Right?
Yes.
So when a guy like Caleb Williams comes along, it's probably going to be number 1 pick.
Yes.
Even if the team that's picking number 1 doesn't need a quarterback. That's just the reality of it. Yep. So, and he's the kind of guy that you trade the guy you drafted 2 years ago for him. I mean, you know what I mean? Like the Bears might have been a little bit more willing to move on from Justin Fields at number 1 if they could get Caleb Williams. You know what I mean? Maybe. Who knows? But, I mean, you can call him a jabroni or whatever, but
very good player, man.
The thing for me about Caleb Williams is this is what is so dumb about his decision to put that stuff on his fingernails. Because if you actually read about Caleb Williams, you're like, this is a really good kid.
He's a good human. Yep.
Like he gives away a lot of his NIL money to charity and different things. And he does a lot of things that you want your quarterback to be about. But then he does that one stupid, immature thing. And that's all anybody's talking about.
Yep.
This is not some punk kid that's a bad attitude and gonna. I mean, we see him wearing the flashy suits. I don't care about that. I mean, he's building an image because we live in an NIL or where you need to build that image, right? I don't fault him for that. Have you seen some of the goofy crap that Joe Burrow wears in the games? That guy, that's like, dude, are you in the NBA or something? Like you and Cam Newton are just like, what do you guys do?
Cam Newtons are over the top.
It's insane.
They always have been, yeah.
But the whole thing is, but that doesn't make them bad people. If Caleb Williams would not have done that FND and F Utah thing on his fingernails, I think the perception of him by a lot of people is completely different.
I think so too.
Because anyone that I've ever talked to that's known the kid or does any kind of background into the things he's involved in, you're like, that's exactly what you want your franchise quarterback to be doing. But guess what, guys? He's a sophomore in college. I praise God that people were not advertising nationally things that I did as a sophomore in college. Thank God that's not the reality of it, right?
I was doing nothing but great things when I was a sophomore in college.
Yes, you keep telling yourself that. Your sarcasm is in rare form today, my friend.
Sorry,
You're
man.
bringing it
Sorry.
today. You are bringing the heat today, my friend. All right, let's get to some more here for Ryan. I'll ask this one, Ryan, because this is for you from Jason Smith. What is your opinion of Tyson Bagent? He seems to be a baller.
Tyson Bagent,
who that is.
Yes,
Bagent.
he is a quarterback out of Shepherd. Actually,
West Virginia kid. All right.
Yeah, man. I think he threw for 153 touchdowns in his career or something like that. Like just absolute nutty numbers, nutty numbers. He actually had the option, Division II kid. I know the University of Maryland actually was very interested in bringing Tyson Bagent up, try to get him to transfer up. He stayed at Shepherd, 6'3", 220 pounds or so, 215, 220. He was actually at the Senior Bowl this year, so there's obviously some interest there. I think arm strength wise, it's NFL caliber. I don't think it's a plus arm, though. I think it's just a good, solid NFL arm. I think he's an okay athlete that can evade in the pocket when he needs to. And he's an accurate quarterback too. And I think he reads the field pretty well. He hits backside progressions well in that offense that he comes out of. It's just jump from Division II to NFL is a pretty massive jump, right? So, he's going to be a late round drafted kid, but I think there's some developmental upside as far as being a backup quarterback at the next level. He's got some talent to work with, man. He's a good player.
You said what, day 3?
Yeah. I think he's going to be a 6th to 7th round player, but he'll have a chance to stick because he's so smart.
So would you say, Ryan, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm curious about. So obviously Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, Hendon Hooker seem to be the top 5 right now.
Yeah.
Who's the next quarterback off the board and when do you think? Your not prediction, but kind of what you're hearing, what you think is going to be the next guy.
I think there's 2 names that people like a lot that for different reasons. I think one is Jake Haener out of Fresno State, who I think is kind of got that. He's got kind of that gamer tag to him, right? Yeah. It's like he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he actually has a pretty strong arm for his size. Yeah. He's a pretty good outside of structure, and he's just got some good arm talent to him, man. Like he's a talented kid. It's just he's 6 foot and 195, 200 pounds, right? He's a little bit smaller, but I like Haener. I think the NFL likes Haener for what he is. I think he's going to be a really good backup at the next level potentially. The other guy that I think some people are really high on, and it's just a pure upside play, is Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's the guy that some people like because of the athleticism. Like he's a really gifted athlete. He's got a strong arm. Never really got to the level of a passer in college that you would want him to, but in the right system, man, like again, develop behind, in that Baltimore Ravens system, for instance, like he could be a good backup in that.
Look, dog, if Tyler Huntley can start in a playoff game, then Dorian Thompson-Robinson can, right?
Agreed. I mean, no doubt about it.
I'll say this. If Jake Haener was as big as Will Levis, he would be a dude. I mean, it would be his arm is live, Ryan. I mean, it's really live. And as you said, he can definitely make plays off structure, right? Out of the pocket. He's climbing the pocket. He's got good touch when he needs to. He's got good ball placement. He's experienced. He seems to be. You watch him play. You can see him going through his reads. He's got all the tools except for one. He is small, and he's been banged up. I mean, he got banged up a lot this past year, and the fact that he played where he played, I love that kid. I wish he was bigger.
Here's a fun little random tidbit that when I was looking at the database is that so Jake Haener is 6 foot even, 207 pounds. Tanner McKee is 6'6" and a quarter, 231 pounds. They both have the same size hands, which is just kind of funny.
That's wild.
That is wild. That's wild.
So, I was talking about I pray to God that people didn't know what I was doing as a sophomore in college. So Michael Campbell says, was Brian Driscoll a freaknik in the 90s? The documentary is coming out. No comment. So let's move on to the next one.
Tyler Smith says, who is your dark horse this season in each Power 5 conference? I'll name one. I think Penn State is going to be solid with Aller and Nick Singleton running the books.
I don't know if I'd call that a dark horse. I mean, they played in the Rose Bowl last year. Now again,
they won like 11 games, didn't they?
Right, they won 11-2. They beat Utah. They only got to the Rose Bowl because 2 of the top 2 teams made the playoff, but I thought they competed with Ohio State pretty well.
Yep.
So, I wouldn't call them a dark horse. I think that the dark horse for me in that conference, I'm telling you right now, the dark horse in the Big Ten for me, of how I define a dark horse, which means a team you're not expecting, is Iowa. I could see Iowa winning the Big Ten this year, depending on who they match up against in the championship game. If they match up against Ohio State, they're going to have a tough time. That's a bad matchup for Iowa. Iowa does not match up as well against Ohio State. Now, I know they had one win. Ohio State's a much different offense than they were in 2016, schematically in all types of ways. They match up a lot better. I think they would match up a lot better against this Michigan team than they did the one 2 years ago.
Yeah,
in my opinion, I could now. Am I predicting it? No, but that's my dark horse for the Big Ten. My dark horse for the
good one.
Yeah, only because I don't consider Penn State a dark horse. I wouldn't be shocked if Penn State won the Big Ten.
Northwestern, baby, fighting Pat Fitzgerald.
That would be quite the dark horse. Who's your dark horse in the ACC, Ryan?
ACC, Duke, man. Duke's the dark horse. I really think I don't know why Duke is so underrated by the FPI, because you have second year Mike Elko, you have receivers coming back, you have Riley Leonard taking a nice step, you have offensive linemen returning. I think that offense is going to be really good in Duke this year, man. So give me Duke. I think Duke's a sneaky team.
So when you say sneaky, like could potentially play for the conference title?
Yeah,
sneaky?
I would be surprised if they're like 10-2 in a conference championship. Yeah, man.
Yeah,
sure.
I could see that. Mine would be Miami, simply because they're still really talented, and I think that if Tyler Van Dyke can get back on track, I think he's pretty good.
Yeah,
he's done some things this year that I don't love. The whole I'm in the portal until Miami gives me a pay. Like, that bothers me. That's rubbed me the wrong way. That's got me a little bit off the Tyler Van Dyke train, but he's talented and he had a really good spring. Archer just said one too. I like NC State. I do. Because I think NC State's going to be a lot better on offense this year not because of Brennan Armstrong, but because of Robert Anae.
Yeah.
I think Robert Anae's proven he could put a pretty good offense on the field and do it quickly and get it turned around pretty quickly. And he's going to have a quarterback that knows what he can do.
I would like to see Devin Leary with Robert Anae, to be honest.
Well, the only reason that I think it's better for them to have Brennan Armstrong is simply because he knows the offense. That's it. Yeah. I mean, Devin Leary's and the injury history. They both have injury history, so you can't really look at that.
Yeah.
But I also think Robert Anae's offense is better when he has a quarterback willing to run. And that's what Jaron Hall wasn't willing to run enough last year to me. Brennan Armstrong will take off and run.
He will.
And I think that fits what they're doing. And they're good. I mean, Tony Gibson's done you've talked about it a lot, Ryan. He's done a really nice job building a defense with NFL players on it. And they know what they're doing. So I do like that NC State one. I don't know if I'm willing to say they're going to win the title, because I have no faith in Dave Doran to get a team through 12 games. But if Dave Doran can not be that, then I like where they're at this year. But I think Clemson and Florida State, to me, are still the class of the ACC. And I think Clemson's going to be better this year than they were the last 2 years, in my opinion. And I think Florida State, to me, is my pick to win that league this year as of right now. Big 12, Ryan, do you have a dark horse in the Big 12? I mean, you could technically say Texas, since they were 8-5 last year.
I guess that's where I would defer to. I mean, Kansas State, maybe. Yeah. Kansas State might be a sneaky team. Yeah. I mean, they lost Deuce Vaughn, but I mean, the quarterback they had was actually playing pretty well down the stretch after Adrian Martinez got hurt. Will Howard, he was playing pretty good football. So, and they're always going to play a tough physical brand of football, man. So, I mean, could they make it to the championship game? Sure. I mean, did they do that last year? They did it last year, literally. So,
yeah. Baylor's mine. They had a lot of guys coming back from last year's team, and Dave Aranda has shown when I have a team with a lot of returning starters, I can do some damage.
I love Dave Aranda.
Yeah.
He's a really good defensive mind.
Yep,
really
that's mine. Pac-12. Who? Somebody said UCLA. I think that's a good one, because I mean, Oregon's
Washington State, baby. Washington State.
So let's say this: like Washington, USC, and Oregon cannot be dark horses because they're all considered the best teams in that division.
Yeah.
Washington State, I mean, you said it kind of jokingly, but I like that.
I'm serious. I think defensively they're going to be very rock solid. I think Cameron Ward in year 2 is going to take a big step.
That's the one, because I think the reason a lot of these kids that go from the FCS level to Division I for 1 year struggle a lot of times.
Yeah.
But because they're only there for 1 year, they don't have the time to get used to the speed of the
Yep.
game. I think, to your point, getting him in year 2 now,
Yes.
I think he's going to be. I think they got a shot. I like what they're tough. They're a lot more physical than they've been in the past. They played really good. Surprise. Their overall numbers won't blow you away. They gave up 22 points a game, mainly because the Washington game kind of inflated those numbers. But 17, 14, 7, 9, 24, 21, 14, 18, 20 are points that they gave up last year. I think they faded down the stretch because their depth. Got whooped pretty good by Fresno in the bowl game. Gave up a lot to Washington. Gave up a lot to Oregon. But the 30 they gave up to USC is very misleading. They played very well defensively against USC that game.
Oh, they were giving USC, they were giving USC some trouble early in that game.
Yeah,
man.
They were. And if the offense takes that jump that you're talking about, Ryan, which I think it's certainly capable of, then they've got a shot to be. They got a shot to be that. I like the UCLA one that somebody mentioned in the chat. I have to find out who that was. But you know who my true dark horse, and you may tell me they don't count as a dark horse because of what they did last year. I think Oregon State is the team that could sneak up and be. They could. Utah better be careful because Oregon State is trying to out Utah with how they're building that team. Right, physical defense, fundamentally sound, toughness in the trenches. I mean,
now they got DJ Uyunglele.
I think fits what they're doing. All the pressure's off of him.
Yep.
He's going to play in a pro style system, which we've said. I didn't like he even said it this week. The system was not work for me. I don't like that he said it. It seems like, sour grapes. Like, dude, you went 5 of something in your last game. That's not the system's fault
or something like that.
Yeah. I'm actually going to pull that up. Like what his the last game he played in. He went 8 of 29 against South Carolina.
It's not great.
Bro, I hate to break it to you. That's not the scheme fault. That's your fault. No scheme is making you go 8 for 29. I'm sorry. That's on you. But I think to his point, it was in his head, right?
Yeah.
Fresh start. And I think Jonathan Smith is a good coach. And the scheme stinks. I've said this for years. Clemson won on talent. I've not liked their scheme since Chad Morris left, to be completely honest with you. So, yeah, that's where I'm at on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to these last couple, right, before we get out of here. Let's see here. I just thought this was funny. I'm going to read this one by Insured by Big. This is our LSU fan. He goes, "Am I the only fan of my team that wakes up every day nervous of some kind of unexpected news? Ha. Due to the dysfunctions of previous staffs at LSU, I'm scared for life. Ha. Hey, bro, we're Notre Dame fans. You've won 3 titles since the last time we've won one, so we don't want to hear you complaining. You won a title 4 years ago. We have no sympathy for you, my man. No sympathy. I'll take dysfunction sandwiched between a national championship and one of the greatest teams ever. All in good fun, though. But this is what we would call welcome to being a Notre Dame fan. That's what our off seasons are like almost every year.
Welcome to the 31 years of my life.
Yeah. Exactly. We have no sympathy for you, buddy. None whatsoever. Here's a recruiting question from Katie.
Katie Keeper says, "What are your expectations for Caleb Smith? Is he as ready to play right away as the other 3 freshmen?"
No, I don't think he doesn't have the 15 practice head start. In some ways, let me say no. I don't think he'll play as much, but is he as ready? Yes, I actually do think he's ready because I think Caleb Smith's a pretty good route runner and can do some things after the game. He's the kind of guy you could just put in there, say, Ryan, let's throw in some crossers, let's run him some now screens. I think he could play as a freshman if he needed to. So to answer your question, Katie, yes, I do think Caleb Smith is there. The difference is in that area. Here's the one big difference. Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores are physically developed players. Rico's 200 pounds. Jaden Greathouse is 210. Caleb Smith is skinner. He's not going to have the strength that those guys brought to the table. And Chancey Stuckey pointed that out about Braylon James. He's like, Braylon put on 15 pounds as he got here. That's from January to March. Caleb's not going to have that advantage because he's not going to get here till June.
Right.
So I think that's the thing that's going to hold him back. He's not as physically advanced as those other guys, but his game is good enough. His polish, his athleticism, Ryan, if there was a need for him, he could play as a freshman. I don't think there's going to be a need, and I think the strength is the thing going to hold him back. But yes, his game is ready to play as a freshman.
That's
opinion.
one thing we don't talk about enough with the spring is like, yeah, you're getting the playbook, you're down, you're, working with the coaches, but also Coach Bayless time, baby, like getting some of that weight on you. I mean, that's very important, obviously, to get that full winter, spring, all of it, right? The whole gambit as far as the development physically. So it's big time.
We got one from Joe Medina.
Joe Medina says, Brian, was Chris Tyree moved? Good.
Sorry.
Was Chris Tyree moved to wide receiver because the staff knew Lorenzo Styles was planning to transfer?
No, not at all. They moved him to receiver because they knew they needed to get him the football. If the staff knew that Lorenzo was going to transfer, they would have not let him practice. I mean, we saw that somewhere else. I don't think Lorenzo was saying – Lorenzo thought about leaving in – I want to be fair because I'm not the biggest Lorenzo Styles fan based on a lot of things I've heard over the last year. But what Lorenzo did, however, is when he made the decision to stay at Notre Dame, he worked. I don't think he had the greatest attitude, but he worked. He practiced hard this spring. He didn't look like a kid that was going through the motions to transfer. He didn't. And so there was no move there because of that. It's a fair question, Joe, but that's not why they moved. They moved Chris Tyree because they wanted to get another receiver out there, but they wanted to get that skill set. Ryan talked about it earlier. They don't have anyone like Chris Tyree at receiver, and they need someone like Chris Tyree at receiver. Lorenzo could do it, but Lorenzo's more of a vertical guy. He's fast. So he's ran a reverse as a freshman, ran a now screen that went for a long way, but it's not the best part of his game. Chris Tyree's a guy that you just say, how can we get him the football in space as much as possible? And they don't have a lot of that. So that's what it was about. It wasn't about anything negative to Lorenzo or anything else like that, in my opinion. I don't think it was.
Yep. Next question from Ant_VR. Hypothetically, if Notre Dame loads up on recruitments over the next few months and has a great season in the fall, can't they just take the Cedric Irvin approach if some high-level guys want to commit?
I don't think you can do that. I think the only reason that I was willing to justify the Cedric Irvin thing is because there was a change in coaching.
Yep.
That's it. I would rip Notre Dame hard if they took, let's just use Jack Larson as an example because everybody's using him as an example. If they dropped Jack Larson to take Jaden Riddell, I would crush the Notre Dame staff publicly in our shows. That you can't do that. You're Notre Dame. You don't punish the kid because you screwed up your evaluation, right? You figure out a way to make it work if you're going to do it. I'm a big believer in that. Unless there's some extenuating circumstance where the kid gets in trouble, the kid's got a bad – I mean, if there's some issue where let's say Notre Dame had a commitment from a kid named Johnny Jones and they like the kid and then Johnny's not going to class, he's not putting in the work, he's got a bad attitude, he's not doing the things that you said, okay, you're committed, now here's what you need to do, then drop him. But you're not dropping him because somebody else came along better. You're dropping him because he's no longer doing the things that you need him to do to be a part of your football program, right? Then drop him. If you say, hey, Johnny Jones, you've committed to us, you told us you're not going to take any more visits, and he wants to start taking visits, drop him. Totally fine with that. But just because, oh, wow, something better came along, because then you are now saying, I don't want to hear crap from you when your top players start looking around because now Alabama's calling.
Right.
I don't want to hear crap from you because that's exactly what you did to this kid over here who did nothing wrong. Cedric Irvin did nothing wrong. Nothing. He was bought in. He was locked and loaded. If Lance Taylor and Brian Kelly were still the coaches at Notre Dame and they'd have dropped Cedric Irvin, I would have hammered them for it. But when there's a change in coaching staff, that new staff needs to be able to be honest with young men and say, hey, look, I know the previous staff liked you, but I don't think you can play for me. And so we'd like to move on from you. I didn't love it, but I understood it, and I was okay with it because they were honest with them. And I felt terrible for Cedric because Cedric did everything right, Ryan. Everything right. Didn't visit anywhere else. Was totally bought in. Helped recruit other people to the program. He did everything right. But I understood it because it was a change. I didn't like the way they went about it with Jack Nickel as much. Excuse me. because the coach that recruited him jumped the gun. That's on him. You should have dealt with that at the time. You should say, hold on, Jack. I know that you want to commit, but listen, we're not ready for that just yet. I didn't like that one as much. But, it is what it is. So, no, I would not be okay with that, and I would not. That's not a precedent you want to start setting at Notre Dame. You got to be different. I would rather – people are going to disagree. I would rather Notre Dame lose and still be able to say we're doing this thing the right way than to just start saying, screw it. I don't care how it impacts kids. We're going to do whatever we got to do to win. If that means that a kid that's been committed to us for 10 months, we're telling you, screw you because we got somebody better, I don't want to win that way. I don't
think it's sustainable from a culture perspective either.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't want to be a millionaire because I
figuring
stole.
that out.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a millionaire because I stole. Right. If I become a millionaire, it's because I worked my butt off and I did it the right way. Not that I really care about being a millionaire. I'm just trying to make a point. Right. I know. I don't want to do it that way. Do it. That's why I became a Notre Dame fan, because they do it different. Now, Notre Dame is not perfect, right? They're not this high and mighty, never do anything wrong. They got their issues. They got their demons as well. But when it comes to that, I would never support that.
Yeah.
And as long as that kid's doing what he said he was going to hold up his end of the bargain, and he's done that, then you don't drop a kid, in my opinion. You just don't take a kid early if you're not sold that he's definitely going to be there. Don't
penalize a kid for not doing anything wrong, man. That's
right.
Kind of where it is. Yep.
Right. Absolutely. And I understand I get where you're coming. I'm not hammering you. It's a very fair question. I get it. We've seen Notre Dame do it.
Programs do it. And programs
yes,
do it.
They do.
Not just Notre Dame, but a lot of programs
yes, they do
it.
The only time I support it is if a kid's not doing what he's supposed to do and or if there's a coaching change.
Right.
Like a real coaching change. That's it. And you better do that early. Like really early. The only knock I had on them with Savage Irvin thing is they should have made that announcement like right away. As soon as Deion McCullough came in and they realized, like, hey, this ain't the guy. They should have let him know. That's my only issue.
Next question from Irish Chi-Town. What's up, Irish Chi-Town? Brian and Ryan, should Notre Dame bring in defensive back R.J. Moten from Michigan, who recently entered the transfer portal?
Ryan, I spoke on this enough already. I started this because I don't know if I've given you the opportunity to speak on this yet. I know I've talked over you the two times we've asked this question. It's
not something that I can give like an in-depth conversation because the RJ Moten I know played at Delray in high school. I haven't watched RJ Moten at Michigan enough. I know he wore number 6 and that he's a bigger safety, but I just haven't seen him play safety enough at Michigan to have a legitimate understanding of how he would fit into the Rams defense.
What was he in high school?
He played running back. He played running back and safety. He was more of a running back in high school, honestly. He was a very good player. Very good player. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll go to
never lost to him though. Never lost to him. But yeah.
Here's a good one. I'm going to read this one, Ryan, because it's for you.
Yeah.
This is from Tyler Evans. He says, "Who has the funniest mock draft that you have seen?"
I'm not going to drop names, Tyler. Well, actually, I will drop one name in a minute, but there is a site that has 2024, 2025, and 2026 mock drafts. So any site that does that is stupid.
Is that the one that has like 97 Ohio State kids in the first round?
Yes.
Okay. Has Jack Kaiser as a first round pick, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. I will say that the worst conversation point I've heard of a mock draft was actually Chris Collinsworth was on a PFF podcast where he said with the 31st overall pick, he would draft Hendon Hooker to the Kansas City Chiefs. And his reasoning was, the only way the Chiefs aren't going to be good is if Patrick Mahomes gets hurt. And what are you going to do if he's hurt?
Right.
What?
Everything he said was perfectly fine and reasonable, Ryan, if we're talking about a third-round pick.
Yes.
Or your third pick of the second round.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Totally fair.
Yes.
But your first-round freaking pick? Like, that was just like, come on, man.
31st overall pick's going to be a quarterback.
Come on, bro.
Come on, Chris. Come on, man.
I would have lost. If I was there, I would have lost my job because he's the boss. I mean, Chris Collinsworth owns that thing. I would have gotten fired. Yeah. I would have been like, I'm sorry. This is your site. You're the boss. I realize I'm going to be unemployed now. But that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of in my entire life.
It was so bad, man. I literally couldn't believe, but I was like waiting for someone to say that this was like an April Fool's joke or something. I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. It's so stupid.
Yeah. What you said there was one funny one that you were gonna.
Oh, that was it. That was it.
That was it.
Was that Chris Collinsworth mocked Hendon Hooker? I had to pick 31. So that was fantastic.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I don't know if ever looked at a mock draft and thought it was funny. I just think this is dumb.
That made me laugh after I was like, wow, that's stupid.
Yeah. Like, is this a joke? Is this like April Fool's Day or something like that? What the heck is going on here? Yeah, that was a bad that was used because I saw you tweet that, Ryan, and I was gonna call you but then I saw you, so I'm like, hey, I'm sitting on the floor in my daughter's room working. I was like, I'm not gonna call him right now. So
Juliet did not want to go to sleep last night, man.
I know the struggle Ryan's having right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave him alone. And then here's the last one, Ryan, here from ND Cheat Sheet.
Their question is, with recruiting boards, how specific do coaches get when identifying roster needs? Do they say we need 2 corners and 3 wide receivers? Or do they say we need 1 boundary, 1 field, and 1 X, Y, and Z?
Yes. And the reason I say yes to both is because it's you're building on it, right? So the first thing you do is you kind of come up, okay, here's what our numbers are that we're working with. We can give out right now 23 scholarships this year. Okay, our defense has this many scholarships. Our offense has this many scholarships. As a program, our goal is to be, let's say 44 defensive scholarships and 41 offensive scholarships. Yep. Right now, we have room for 23. And to get to those numbers, we can give, let's say, 10 on offense and 13 on defense. Okay, so offense, you have 10. Then you look at it and say, okay, here's how we're going to distribute these from position to position. And then when you get into the positions where there's more than one guy, receiver and O-line primarily, okay, we have 3 receivers. What are our needs specifically? Man, we need a shifty guy like Ryan was talking about. We need a shifty. Okay, so we've got to get that type of skill set, whether it's a Z or an X. Look, man, we are now, because when this class arrives, Deion Colsey is going to be a senior. Deion's the only true boundary that we have. We really need to get a boundary guy this year. Yeah. Right. So then you get into that once you kind of figure out what your numbers are. How are we going to allocate these scholarships to positions? We need 3. We got 3 offensive. We're going to bring 4 offensive linemen this year. Okay. Look, we've signed a center 3 years in a row. We're great at tackle. So we're, maybe a guard, but we're going to recruit just a bunch of tackles because tackles can move. Or it's like, hey man, we've loaded up, and this is where Notre Dame is. This is why I was a little confused on the Anthony Knapp commitment. Yeah. Because you've loaded up on guards the last 2 years. You've already got Peter Jones in the class, and you're going to take this kid and try to tell me that he can play tackle. I don't see it. Right. Maybe. If he's got 34-inch arms, sure. But you've seen him you saw him in person. I saw a picture of him. I'm like, I just don't see how that kid has 34-inch arms. I don't know who's doing the measurements on that. I don't see it. You need tackles.
They can pay me to come do the measurements. I'm just putting it out there, Notre Dame. I'm pretty good at doing that stuff, man. Just putting it out there. Yeah.
There you go. I dig it. But what I was going to say, Ryan, is you look at it and say, well, look, we've loaded up on guards the last couple of years. We really need tackles.
Yes.
Right? Or we're great at tackle. We're just going to keep recruiting tackles because we can move tackles inside. But this year, I do think we need to go get one pure interior guy that can come in. I mean, then there's the other part of it too is, okay, this year, do we need guys that can help us right now? Or can I take a chance on some projects? So you may say a receiver, like right now in this 2024 class, this is the year to take an Isaiah Canyon because you don't need this receiver class to come in and help you necessarily right away.
Yeah.
If they're good enough to play, they play, but there's not the need like there was in the 23. They needed at least one guy to be able to help out and play. Or you may say, look, we need someone who can play right now. So we got to make sure that we get at least one guy or preferably 2 that are polished enough to come in right now and help. So those things are all part of the process of evaluating what your needs are. Big picture numbers as a class. What's your minimum? What's your maximum? What are the areas on our roster that we might see some movement that could then add to it? And then if we do, where does that additional come from? How do we allocate offense and defense? And then within that, what are the numbers or the specifics that we're going to do from a position? Do I need more field corners, boundary corners? Do I need more middle linebackers, rovers? Do I need more interior D linemen out? Those are all factors into it. But the bigger picture numbers have to go first. Then you do the allocate sides of the ball. And then with that allocation, you figure out what your specific needs are. So I hope that answered your question. I think it did. It was a pretty good answer. I'm not gonna lie.
It was a good answer. It was a great answer, man.
But yeah, it's like with anything. A lot of stuff is like, we as fans, Ryan, we do this. It's just, you take as many kids as you want. Well, that sounds great. I would do that on NCAA all the time back in the day. You know why? Because I just go through and cut a bunch of dudes.
You cut a bunch of people.
Yeah. You know why? Because they weren't real human beings.
Yeah.
So you just cut them. You know what I mean? It's a different deal. There is a lot more that goes into this than just take 4 receivers. Well, it's not that simple. Take 5, 6 defensive linemen. It's not that simple. Now you have 27 defensive linemen and 3 linebackers on your roster. That was the whole beef we had with the Texas A&M class 2 years. So that class isn't as good as people make it out to be. Well, this many points. Yeah, half the class was defensive linemen and receivers.
It's 7 defensive linemen in that class.
And they're 5 receivers?
Something like that.
It was nuts. Well, okay. Who's playing linebacker for you? You literally signed 1 freaking linebacker. You're going to bring back the 6'1" defense? You know what I mean? So and that's what I think people are underestimating about how good Notre Dame's 23 class was. They landed starters, multiple starters, caliber players at every position except 2 or 3. Tight end, running back, quarterback, because they only signed 1, right? They signed an offensive line class that can play together, a receiver class that can play together, a D-line that can fit together to a degree. Only thing that class was missing last year, Ryan, in my opinion, from a line was a Viper. That's it.
Yeah. Yep.
And there you could say, well, Preston Center,
maybe,
possibly, right? So there's just a lot. There's just a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that goes into it. So we had a question from Irish Mills about Tyler Buchner and all that. I think Irish Mills, you joined late. I would encourage you to go back to the beginning. That was the first topic we talked about. There's no way we're going to wrap up now, so there's no way I can give you a good answer there. I just go back to the beginning and listen to that. We discussed the latest with that and whether or not we would or wouldn't take him back. So I just want to give you a chance to check that out. So, but that's going to do it, Ryan. So, hey, folks, I'm going to ask you to do us a big favor. Hit that like button for us, please. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. If you have not done so already, make sure that you subscribe to the CFB Nation channel on our platform, our YouTube platform, and our podcast app platform. But the reason that we're going to push YouTube now is because on Thursday night at 7:30, we're going to go live with a live draft show. So we're just going to kind of go through the draft, give you all our instant feedback, instant analysis, things that we're hearing, have some fun with it. But we're going to do that on the CFB Nation channel. And as always, if you have not done so, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I promise you won't regret it. For Ryan, I'm Brian. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.